All right, we're back. Anthony or Daryl, are we still muted or can you hear me now? Yeah, technical difficulties. We have it happen. We're a self-produced show here, you know. All right, cool. I don't know what that was about. I blame Adam and his North Carolina, New Jersey internet. Let's see here. You know, maybe we set it up on purpose to get all these interactions because you guys are helping us out a lot. So I do appreciate that. Let me push Adam through here. All right.
There you are.
I think we're good. Couldn't hear
Yeah.
you, couldn't hear me. I don't know what it was. Self-produced show, but we're here. Excited to talk with you guys about the bracket tonight. It's crazy how fast this season has gone. Some first four action tonight. The 16 seed game was awesome. Howard with incredible offense, ready for a first round upset, perhaps, which we're going to talk about today. Adam, I hope you got some rest yesterday because it's going to be a busy, busy week ahead for all of us. How are you feeling about things?
Oh, great. I mean, tournament started today. We got some games tomorrow. And then, of course, we got all day basketball Thursday, Friday. And so I'm excited to be here breaking down the bracket because we only had the playing game so far. And really, the only info we got is who BYU may play, which could maybe change things depending on if you preferred NC State instead of Texas. But I'm sure we'll get into that soon.
Yeah, that was a crazy game there at the end. One thing that we need to be aware of here, and I kind of called this out in the Discord, with the Howard game as well, the foul calling. I don't know, the refs, maybe they're a little nervous too, but the fouls it seemed like just ticky tack all game long. In the Howard, they lost one of their best players. They shot like 90% from the field, so it didn't matter. And then North Carolina State, like in the first half, they had three different players pick up two fouls. Two of their bigs, their backup big and their starter, Ben Allen Lubin, fouled out early. Still, Texas tried their best to piss it away. Alas, they do advance to face BYU. Neither team plays defense particularly well, so that'll be an interesting matchup that we'll talk about here. But I'm just excited for these 16 seed games, man. These are always fun for me. I really like the Howard. A lot of people are on UMBC today, that America East, that rigged conference. But Howard got it done, and I'm excited about Prairie View A&M versus Lehigh tomorrow as well. It might be my favorite game on the slate. Anthony asked, did NC State win? No, they tried. Texas tried to piss it away. Tremont Mark made like the kind of shots where they take them and the coach is like, no, and then he makes it and he's like, yes. Charlie! My man Charlie, thank you for checking us out, man. I appreciate it. I love the new profile pic, by the way, the stogie and all. That looks awesome. And Daryl says USA loses to Venezuela in the World Baseball Classic. That's more Adams' realm there, but Venezuela, Dominican Republic, they're probably better than us at baseball, anyways, right? Shout out Texas, and then VCU versus UNC is the one. Go Rams! Yeah, I like the Rams a lot. We're going to talk about that here. We do have the NIT slate, which is broken up on DraftKings as an 8-gamer and then a 2-game play-in slate. But we're not going to talk about that tonight. We're going to strictly talk bracket stuff and matchups. So as we're going here, if you guys have any comments, questions, concerns, please drop them in the chat if you're watching on X or YouTube. And also, if it's on demand, please drop comments there as well. All those likes, shares, and interactions that you guys provide us, a lot of social currency in the world we live in right now. That's very, very important. And you guys really did a good job blasting the thumbs up and the views on our bracket reveal show. We do appreciate that very much. All right, let's pull this up here. Looked at a couple different brackets to see which was the best. I think I landed on, let's see, the CBS bracket. I think this is going to be a good one for us. So let's just kick things off in the East, starting with the number 1 overall seed, the Duke Blue Devils, taking on 16 seed Siena, coached by legendary Syracuse scoring dynamo Jerry McNamara, who may be in line for the Syracuse job. You can see here on the CBS analytics, 1% of the field has taken Siena. Never say never. Big time matchup here. It's a fun one, but Duke should take care of business here with or without several starters. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we could just advance Duke right now. I mean, Siena is a fun team and actually has had success in the past, pulling some upsets. I think 2008 against Ohio State, but not this
nice
time.
pull.
That's that was a fun game, but not gonna have a repeat.
Yeah, that's actually a nice pull. I think they beat I think they beat Vanderbilt at one point too. I without slowing the show down. I'll have to check that now because I totally forgot about that one. Fran McCaffrey was the head coach of Siena, mind you. All right, so we'll move them along here. Yes, Duke moving on. Now the 8-9 games, they all feel like true coin flips. They usually are every year, but this is especially true this year. I have some real problems with this Ohio State TCU game, but why don't you lead us off and give any thoughts and what you think here with this matchup?
This is a rare 8-9 where I actually feel pretty confident. Usually I always get 3 out of 4 wrong. I feel like every year in the 8-9s. I feel like I have a grip on what's going on, and then I look up and I 3 red marks on my bracket in these 8-9 matchups. They're a bit of a hassle, but this one I do feel a little confident in. I'm going with TCU. I know Bruce Thornton is one of those types of players that can really hard carry a team. He's having a great season, even though he's not a DFS option that we really like to play. But TCU, they went through a tough grind in the Big 12. They have 2 bigs, David Punch and Xavier Edmonds, who I think could give Ohio State trouble. Ohio State doesn't really have bigs that can match up with those 2 guys. And I do like Jamie Dixon in the tournament. I also like Jake Diebler, but of course the experience isn't there as much for him. But I really think it comes down to the front court and the Big 12 grind that TCU went through. So I actually feel pretty confident in TCU advancing here and even giving Duke a little bit of a run potentially next round.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me. Game takes place early in the morning in Greenville. We've had a tremendous amount of success with TCU in the DFS realm, and I wanted to be careful, kind of like picking based off of that. Ohio State, I haven't had a ton of success with for fantasy purposes, and I really, like I said, like TCU a lot. But I think the Buckeyes here, they check a lot of boxes here. Elite guard play. I know Thornton, they can be inconsistent, but Thornton and Mobley, I feel like, are just so head and shoulders above the TCU backcourt that's really going to give them an opportunity to feast. I will say that I'm much more confident in the front court, Xavier Edmonds and David Punch, as you mentioned there. They're a little undersized, being that they lost Malik Diallo very early in the season, but they're very tough. They rebound well. And Christoph Tilley, who is really operating as kind of like a Euro style modernized center. He's hurt all the time, right? So he's not like he's going to be super tough. So I do give the edge to TCU slightly in that regard, but this was a true 50-50 for me. In my bracket release that I put out on FTN, I did pick Ohio State over TCU, but like I said, it's a very close one for me, a flip. So I'll go with TCU on you here for the show. I do like TCU there, so we'll pick it. All right, St. John's versus Northern Iowa. This is a Friday game taking place on CBS at 7:10 at night between them and NBC champion Northern Iowa. Now, I did really like Northern Iowa coming into the tournament. I even said I didn't pick them. We had our own little conference tournament contest in the Discord, and I picked Illinois State, but I said I should be really picking Northern Iowa because I feel like as a 6 seed, they're dangerous. They're going to make a run. They shoot well. They defend well. And what do you know? They did make a run here. And I wanted them to face a team like Purdue or a susceptible high major that I felt like they matched up well with. They're 24th in defensive efficiency per Ken Pom, only 153rd in offensive efficiency. They defend the 3 as well as anyone in the country. They can get hot, as we saw. They were every run that Illinois Chicago made in that championship game. They answered it. There was a game against Illinois State. They got out in a hurry, blew them out because of their hot 3-point shooting. And then the semifinals against Bradley kept going on a run, but every time they'd start one, here's Trey Gamble knocking down a 3. Here's Tristan Smith, of all people, knocking down 3s. And these are guys who are shooting like 33, 35%, not supreme shooters by any means, but they have been red hot. They're not going to have the interior to deal with St. John's. Zubia Ejiofor, Bryce Hopkins, Dylan Mitchell. They're just going to get out physical there. So I do think this is a pretty easy matchup on paper stylistically for St. John's. Again, I never want to say never. This Northern Iowa team does have the chops to compete, but unfortunately, I think they got a pretty bad matchup from the committee here. So this is not a 12-5 for me where I think that they will pull the upset. Do you have a different opinion there, or what do you think?
No, and I do like the Missouri Valley Conference a lot, and I think they almost automatically seem to become a trendy upset pick because they tend to fall in the 11 or 12 range. And people saw Drake pull an upset last year. Northern Iowa has actually had success when they've been in the tournament as well. But I think the one key, you brought it up, that Northern Iowa, obviously a very good defensive team. They defend the 3-point line very well. Unfortunately, St. John's isn't really a 3-point shooting team. So you almost have the strength on defense almost negated by the fact that St. John's isn't going to be a volume 3-point shooting team. They're probably going to go inside more to edge of four. Dylan Mitchell's kind of a slasher, do-it-all type of player. So I think Northern Iowa's strengths just they won't be able to exploit St. John's as much as maybe a team like a Louisville that would be more of a voluminous 3-point shooting team. So I'm not going to get cute here. I'm going to take St. John's, even though I do like Northern Iowa and think they could make this game interesting just because of how slow paced they are. There probably won't be as many possessions.
Yeah, when I look at the other 5-12 matchups, it's like if they could have gotten Wisconsin, which I know you're a fan of them, that they could have maybe pushed them. Texas Tech would have been a prime one. Vanderbilt, maybe not so much, but the interior advantage for St. John's is too much to overcome, I think, for them. So we'll advance St. John's here. Move on to the 4-13 game here between the Kansas Jayhawks and my Cal Baptist Lancers, who I love a lot. You see here on the CBS brackets, 94% of users picking Kansas. I love Cal Baptist. They have some real, like, just effective scoring types that can have their March moment here. And it really seems like stylistically, once again, and experience-wise, they're just going to be completely overmatched. Rick Croy's coaching Baptist. He has for quite some time here since their transition to D1. They only transitioned to D1 like a year before COVID. And here they are, first tournament game in history. Dominic Daniels, high usage guy. He's a senior 5'10", Mighty Mouse type. Had he had more eligibility, this would be a guy that would be in the portal getting all kinds of NIL offers from bigger teams. They also have Jaden Jackson and Martell Williams. So they have the perimeter that can definitely hang tough. A lot of people are already talking Flory Badunga for Kansas. He's our guy, shot blocker. They've got the size, but I wouldn't necessarily pick Kansas just because of a size angle. Cal Baptist does have 6'11" Jonathan Grimman, 7-footer Brady Henage, and 6'10" Thomas Ndong, who's transferred in from Oregon State. And they always have 7 different 7-footers. So they have the size and the fouls to give there against Kansas. And I guess it really comes down to which version of Darren Peterson shows up. If he's engaged, wants to be on the floor, like, it's going to be very difficult for Cal Baptist defense to really contain him. But if he's going to feel like checking himself out, or there's something tomfoolery and shenanigan, remember Samford really, had Kansas on the ropes a few years ago, might be able to see something from the Lancers here. They are 50th in defensive efficiency. Offense leaves a little bit something to be desired there, but they're also 6th in 3-point defensive percentage. So much like Northern Iowa, a pretty elite defense here, but not the offensive chops probably for a team like Kansas. I really, really want to pick this Cal Baptist team, and I'll probably bet them and take the points. I do think that, spotting them double-digit points is a little bit too aggressive here, personally. So I'll probably take that as a betting angle, but I do think that Kansas is probably the right selection here. And this is another one of the matchups where I wish the 13-seeded Cal Baptist would have gotten a different 4-seed than they got. What do you think?
Yeah, first of all, congratulations on the Baptist pick in the conference tournament little contest we had going on. I really thought Utah Valley was going to win that. And Cal Baptist, they really opened my eyes a little bit. That Daniels kid, oh man, if they could figure out a way to win this game, he's going to be probably the next tournament darling, almost like a Max A. Smith from Oral Roberts several years back. But it's going to be tough. I mean, I would take the points if this was a betting perspective, just because we don't even know what we're going to get from Peterson. There's always a chance he could pull himself out. There's always a chance he could play less minutes just because they want to preserve him. But I do think he also probably has something to prove in this tournament, because everything that happened during the season, it's been more negative publicity for him than positive. But if he puts up a very good performance in 1, 2, 3, even 4 NCAA tournament games, helps Kansas go on a run, that's going to help solidify his draft stock more and kind of quell some of the concerns that people have about him. So I think Kansas has a little bit of something to prove, and they're just not going to – Cal Baptist is just not going to have an answer for a Badunga anyway. So
like I said,
Cal Baptist.
Yeah, for sure. They have like I said, they have the size, but the skill set, the athleticism, like, that's clearly not going to be there. They're going to be fouling a lot. They're going to have to use those fouls. And as much as I wanted to pick Cal Baptist here, I just couldn't do it. Bill Self, the experience difference here. Melvin Council, Trey White, like they just have grizzled veterans all around. And you had mentioned Peterson with something to prove. You surely in the locker room, the staff, assistants, teammates are saying, hey, people are starting to doubt you. Now they're talking about someone else, the number one pick. This is your opportunity. Like I'm almost tempted to fire him into my main lineup in DFS realm because I think he's going to have a pretty big game, like you said. So we'll go ahead and move Kansas along here to face St. John's in the second round. Do a quick check here. AB says, like the betting perspectives, keep them coming. Appreciate you. And Daryl says, offense beats defense, especially when you can shoot from the outside in the opening rounds. Defense mostly matters in the Elite Eight, Final Four, and title game. Yeah, you got to have a little of both. And there's plenty of people posting it. You don't need me to tell you that the last couple of years, the champion has been inside the top 20 for offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency. So you definitely need both. All right. Let's move along here to the 6-11 matchup between the Louisville Cardinals and the South Florida Bulls, aka the Kashawn Breyer Bowl. You may remember a couple years ago, Sean Breyer was like basically a star for this USF team. Now he can't get minutes at all for Louisville, but he's dealt with many injuries, kind of ruined his career a bit. You can see a bit of people here, 36% of the public picking South Florida, 64% on Louisville. I know I like South Florida quite a bit, but why don't you kick us off here and give us your take on this one?
Yeah, I hate to be in line with you so many picks so far. I know people probably want to see some differing of opinions. I know we differed a little bit on the 8-9, but South Florida is a team that it was the first upset that I picked when I was going through the bracket on Sunday night right after the selection show. I just like that team. They're hot right now, and I do think there is something to be said about momentum coming into the tournament. I know you kind of have to reset after your conference tournament because everybody starts from scratch. Everyone's 0-0 going into the big dance, but I do think they have a lot of momentum. I also think they have a lot of talent. Isaiah Nelson is going to be a problem for Louisville, and he's been a problem for pretty much everybody in the American Athletic Conference. But I do think they're not a great three-point shooting team, but they can get really hot with Joseph Pinion and Wes Enos, who I think Enos is one of those, another type of player who could be low-key, like a little bit of a darling if he makes 7 or 8 threes, and he's certainly capable of it. So I do think they have a little bit of the equalizer with Louisville because Louisville loves to shoot the three. But I think Enos and Pinion could possibly answer those threes with threes of their own. And I do think that Nelson is a much better big than you would see from technically a mid-major conference, and it could give Louisville some trouble. So, and 11s also tend to have a lot of success against 6 seeds. We don't know the status of Michael Brown, even though we think he's probably going to play. So it's definitely an upset pick that I'm willing to make, even though I am a little upset that the public seems to be all over it as well.
Yeah, and there was some public upsets last year. Tendency to try to fade that. McNeese State was a popular one, and it did come to fruition. So, I obviously look at that, but this one, just metrics wise, situationally, it just feels like the right side. South Florida, they're getting like 6.5, 7.5 at one point. I think it's down to 5.5 now. You mentioned Michael Brown. Even if he plays, he's going to be barely 80%, if that. And then he has to deal with Wes Enos guarding him. Kenyon Giles for Wichita State, they just beat Wyoming tonight in the NIT. He had an okay game, but he had that game in the AAC semifinals where it was against Tulsa. He hit like 1,000,000 threes, 7 to be exact, put up 27 points, just completely unstoppable. They threw Enos on him in the final, and he just couldn't do anything. I think he hit his first shot, and then he didn't get another clean look the rest of the game. Enos held him to just 5 points. So imagine being put in a defensive blender like that. You're not 100%. You're a freshman. You've never been here before. Granted, Enos hasn't either. It's the first time since 2012 that South Florida's been in the tournament, but a veteran because he's definitely played several years. And Michael Brown, it doesn't seem like a good situation for him. If he doesn't play, then you're talking about throwing him on Conwell. Then you're having to rely on, Woolley, who's been good, inconsistent, Hadley, who's better as like your third or fourth option. And then you mentioned Nelson. He's got a clear advantage in the front court over Frew, Ali Khalifa, who can never stay healthy. Nelson, he doesn't have any more eligibility, but he's another player that would make a ton of money in NIL next year had he had another year. Reigning AAC Player of the Year. This one just seems too good for South Florida. I think it's an easy bet, plus 5.5. Would have if you didn't get on it right away, kind of not the greatest number. Maybe you hope for a live spot. But I definitely love South Florida. So let's advance them here. The 11 seed over the 6, our first real true upside. We had the 9 over the 8 with TCU, but this is the real upset. Moving on to the 3-14 matchup, Michigan State, Mr. March, Tom Izzo, taking on North Dakota State, the champions in the Summit. You can see 95% of the public here on CBS on the Spartans, and for good reason. The Summit just lost St. Thomas here to Seattle U at their crack gym in the NIT. My man Minisali had fouled out. Summit League has some really competitive teams. They're a fun league to watch, but there's still a lot of newer D1 teams and programs that are finding their footing, and they've definitely had some success in the tournament and gives some teams some scares. I think that stylistically, it's a pretty poor spot for them against the Spartans. Now, I wouldn't lay a big spread with Michigan State because I also feel like Izzo will just take this approach of get in, get out, and move on. But I think they'll never really be in any sort of danger here. Jeremy Fears, true gamer. Who knows what kind of nut punch kick he's going to do to poor Bison perimeter players here. We know the front court for the Spartans is fairly loaded, inconsistent at times, but they've got a lot of size and they've got some mobility. Jackson Keeler can hit threes with the best of them. And this would have been a spot, against anyone else, I would have maybe tried to find an angle for North Dakota State, but I just, unfortunately, I'm trying to be a little bit more deliberate with my upset picks and think with my head more than my heart. So I do have Michigan State over North Dakota State here. I know that's tough for you as our resident Michigan State hater, but I think even you are probably going to have to pick them here, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna go that far just yet. I do like the Summit League though. North Dakota State, I think they may have been the last Summit team to pull an upset in the first round. I think that was maybe 2015 Oklahoma, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, the Summit League gets given some teams some scares, but we've seen them be like 12 seeds at times, which is much more realistic for an upset. So I'm not taking them in the 14 spot over Michigan State. So yeah, we can push Michigan State along as much as I love that.
Nice pull. 2014-2015 overtime win over Oklahoma, coached by Saul Phillips. He's no longer alone. He was with Ohio for a long time. Overtime win over Oklahoma. That was I do remember that one now. Isaiah Cousins, that was the Oklahoma team that had Buddy Hield, Isaiah Cousins. I think that was like the year before they made their run, perhaps. Ryan Spangler. That was a fun team, but yeah, they took it in the shorts there in an overtime loss. Nice pull. Love it. All right, let's move on. We'll move them around. 7-10 matchup here. UCLA taking on the 10 seed UCF. Now we have some injuries here. There are several teams in the tournament that I feel like I want to pick against simply because of those situations. You see 68% of the public on UCLA. That surprises me a little bit. I do like this UCF team. Coming into the tournament, UCLA will have Donovan Dent and Tyler Bilodeau. They both suffered what at the time seemed like some pretty serious injuries. I question them being 100%, and that's enough to kind of tip the scales for me here. So I do have a lean towards UCF, and in my FTN bracket, I did pick them, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, it's going to come down to the status of Bilodeau and Dent, and I'm sure we might get a little bit more information on them as the date gets closer, but I think you did say they're expected to play. I would expect them to play. I mean, if there's any chance that they could get out there, they're going to try to do it. The most interesting part of this is probably just the fact that I believe it's an East Coast game. I think it might be in Philly. So, Mick Cronin's got to get on a plane and fly to the East Coast, which we know he loves. Hasn't had much success on the East Coast either. But I do think with Dent and Bilodeau healthy, I still would lean UCLA. Donovan Dent's just been on an epic run in terms of assist to turnover rate. And we saw him with New Mexico last year. I believe it was last year. They beat Clemson, if I'm not mistaken. And so he has a little bit of experience in the tournament as well as had some success. He's just a player I've loved ever since he was at New Mexico on some of those loaded teams. So as long as those two guys are healthy, I'm still going to go with UCLA here. But I think this could be one of those games that comes down to the last shot.
Yeah, and Dent's got some good, like you mentioned, tournament experience. Was it 2 or 3 years ago they had actually lost close game to Clemson, and then they beat Marquette last year, and I believe it was the 10-7 matchup. So yeah, he's got the experience. He's pretty fresh off a triple double too. I mean, he's just been putting up some ridiculous numbers. What was that? The Rutgers game, was it 12, 10, and 12?
Yep.
So a healthy Dent and a healthy Billadou, I think that would push me towards UCLA, as much as I have disdain for the angry elf Mick Cronin, their head coach. But I still lean towards UCF here. So I think I'll tentatively kind of just move UCF here, unless you have a major objection, and we'll call it a small upset. All right, UConn versus Furman.
No, we moved to CSU.
Okay, sounds good. UConn as the 2 seed taking on the 15 seed Furman. Now UConn, they could have, they could have had a claim for the 1 seed, and we kind of touched on this during the bracket reveal show. That it was quite obvious, the committee, lie number one that they lie about every year, is that the Saturday Sunday games actually matter. Now UConn got dog walked in the Big East final, so it didn't really matter, but I almost have to question, even if they won the Big East title, if they would have actually moved them to the 1 seed. They certainly deserved it even without the Big East crown. And there's several teams, Houston and Iowa State, that maybe could have made a case for that 4th 1 seed as well. This is a good spot to be in, though, for UConn, because they kind of get to use a little bit of that bulletin board material. They're doubting us, can kind of play that. They're not an underdog, but they can kind of take that mentality on. And we know Coach Hurley, man, when he has that chip on his shoulder, he's as good as anyone in terms of in-game adjustments and coaching. So Furman has a potential draft prospect in Alex Wilkins. He'll probably be a hot commodity in the portal after this game. But UConn's clearly going to, neutralize him, or the game plan is going to be to neutralize him. So another low major team that I absolutely love in Furman, but I just can't find any real avenue outside of UConn getting into early foul trouble and Furman shooting 75% from long range, in which UConn loses. What do you think?
Yeah, there's no reason to get cute here again. I know we'll probably say that many times in this first round with some of these matchups. Furman wasn't even a high-end team in their conference. I think they were the 6th seed. Obviously, they beat Virginia a couple of years ago, so they do have some pedigree, but no shot against UConn. And UConn, like I said, has something to prove. Hurley in the tournament, you got veterans and Caravan. They're not going to fall apart here against Furman.
No, I think that I'm considering maybe a spread hit here on Furman, just because they're coached by Bob Ritchie, and I would feel, and he's a longtime Furman coach, I feel like they'll be scrappy to the end. But at the same time, I almost have to think that Hurley, he's not the type to take his foot off the neck of an opponent. If they go up by 25-30, he may just continue to pile it on, especially if they can, take Wilkins out of the game offensively. So, yeah, UConn should advance here pretty easily and play the role of overlooked underdog, even though we know they're not. It's kind of like the stories that come out about Jordan. This guy looked at me wrong, so I made up a whole story that he, called my mom fat, and I wanted to kill him, and I dropped 40. It's that kind of whole situation, that mentality. All right, sticking in the East here, we're gonna go. We'll hit each region, and we'll get our regional champion, and then we'll bounce to the next one. So our potential second round matchup here: Duke as the number 1 overall seed taking on TCU. Now I'll let you take over on this one, because you mentioned TCU potentially could even give Duke some trouble. We don't think they'll get Caleb Foster back to this point, and may not even have him for the tournament at all. It does sound like they have a pretty good shot of getting Patrick Ngbangba back by the TCU/Ohio State game, but that's still up in the air as well. They definitely need him, because TCU has that front court with Xavier Edmond and David Punch to do some damage. But again, the perimeter of TCU, I got a lot of questions about them and being able to face this Duke team. So where are you at this one?
Yeah, stylistically, these teams aren't that different. They both probably want to go inside, play through their bigs. It is a big deal whether Patrick Ngumba is able to play. If he's not, that really makes me, interested in TCU, not enough to take them necessarily, but it certainly would be interesting. We saw, Duke struggle a little bit with Florida State, and they were playing pretty neck and neck with Clemson down Foster and Ngumba. So if you're down both those guys against a TCU team with that type of front court, becomes a little interesting. But I'm going to assume, like you as well, that Ngumba probably plays. And we already know how tough Duke is, and Cam Boozer, and he's won at pretty much every level he's ever played at. So I'm not going to take TCU, but I do really like this matchup, and I'll be interested in watching this one.
Yeah, and I feel like this is one of those spots like the one seeds we've had in the especially the recent past, like a second round matchup for a powerful one seed. They get pushed by this scrappy, they're a high major team typically in the 8-9 spot. Maybe they underwhelmed a little bit down the stretch or early on and got hot, whatever. Reminds me of the Duke UCF game with Zion Williamson and Taco Fall, and UCF, really pushed them and had Duke on their heels for a lot of that game. Officiating in that one was pretty porous. You could say that. And in another realm, I think UCF did pull off the upset on that Zion Williamson led squad. This could be something similar. I could see TCU maybe leading part of the game. Duke getting a little bit frantic, but eventually calming down. And this could be one of those early tournament legacy style games for Cameron Boozer, where he just delivers this monster 2020 type of performance, reminds everybody who he is and Duke is, what they can do. And kind of, puts the fear of God in the rest of the region in the tournament after a game like this. So, yeah, we'll advance Duke because I do think they do win, but I think they get a scare here in this game. Whoever it is, even if it's Ohio State, I think there's a scare looming, but I think Cameron Boozer is going to absolutely go nuke, and that'll be a game that I will be preaching and saying at the time. Will this be on Saturday? Not to fade him. All right, moving on, we have the potential 4-5 matchup in this region, man, for the number one overall seed. To me, and some may differ, it feels a bit of the death region. We always want to put names to things, and we always like to name one of the regions the death region. They're the best seed, the highest seed, the number one overall seed, but they got a litany of Hall of Fame coaches. We've already talked about Tom Izzo, Bill Self, Rick Pitino. This is an absolutely loaded Coach Hurley, loaded region for the number one seed. And if Duke or whoever comes out of this region, they're going to be, in my eyes, a heavy favorite to cut down the nets. St. John's versus Kansas, 5 versus 4. I think St. John's is misseeded here. You can see the people that have picked it. It's pretty close to a 50-50 spot here. I personally think, this is worth the price of admission, of course. Pitino versus Self. Must-see TV. St. John's, they had an early exit last year against Arkansas. Very ugly game, benching their best player, R.J. Lewis, some controversy. It was all bad. I don't think we're going to experience that again. I think they'll be completely ready this time. And overall, from top to bottom, both of these teams are fairly deep. But I just give a little bit of the edge to St. John's. Where this could go wrong is if shooting comes into play. St. John's goes cold, which during the offseason, they went in the portal and tried to get some shooters, Josiah Sellers, Joe Sinsanen. They got some guys who on paper could shoot, but it just hasn't come to fruition. Consistency from beyond the arc, it's still been a problem for them. Guys like Melvin Council and Trey White can get hot quickly. We know that Darren Peterson can make shots from all over the place. So there is a pathway for both of these teams. But personally, I do lean the 5 over the 4 here with St. John's. What do you think about that?
I'm going different on this one. And actually, I was on St. John's probably ever since Sunday until maybe an hour before the show. I was just thinking about it a little more and saying, everybody's on St. John's. A lot of people picking St. John's even that go to the Final Four. And I do have a little bit of concern about them offensively. I have a little bit of concern of them when they're not playing at Madison Square Garden in front of essentially their home fans. I do think that Badunga down low can at least frustrate Zuby Ejiofor a little bit. And it's just one of those where you kind of brought it up a little bit. Kansas has a lot more weapons on offense that could kind of get hot here. I do think that people maybe are overvaluing St. John's a little bit. Yes, they did play UConn well twice, but Kansas has faced Arizona. They face Houston. They face Iowa State. They're not going to be intimidated by St. John's. St. John's is a team that likes to bully you. And I don't think they're going to really intimidate Kansas in that way. And I do think that Kansas, the fact that Badunga down low could probably handle Zuby, which is St. John's biggest strength, I almost lean Kansas. And that's, of course, you don't know what we're getting from Peterson, but if you have a healthy Peterson too, so I'm actually going to go Kansas.
Yeah, the guard, guards in March, it's a cliche, but it still ends up being the thing. Look at last year's Florida team on the rope several times, and Walter Clayton just Super Saiyan mode his way and undeniably winning for Florida game after game. It's very important. And when I look at this, I do think Zuby a little more offensively skilled than Badunga. I think Badunga's a much better, I shouldn't even say much better, but he's a better shot blocker, probably even par rebounding. That matchup's kind of negated. It's when you look at the guards and the wings, Bryce Hopkins can certainly have big games. Maybe he negates Trey White. Then you've got Sellers and Darling versus Peterson and Council. And when you look at that, and if it comes down to that matchup or those 2v2, then yeah, you almost have to lean Kansas. The coaching is pretty on par, two legendary coaches. But yeah, the guard play for Kansas. I'm actually starting to see people. You're right. I've seen people pick St. John's over Duke, but I'm also starting to see the pendulum swing a little bit, and I'm seeing more people today talk about Kansas. We'll go ahead and advance Kansas because of the guard play there. In my FTN bracket, I did pick St. John's. I would have either one losing to Duke, so it's not that huge, but that's one of those games that's going to be very, very close. And if it comes down to the guards, yeah, I would give the edge to Kansas. All right, we'll move on to the 11 seed, fresh off the upset against Louisville, taking on Michigan State. Now, this one to me feels like, again, the Spartans, maybe, they win comfortably against North Dakota State, but nothing flashy, just kind of get in, get out, and do their thing. This is one against South Florida where they're going to have to do a little bit more. I feel like this is one of those classic 1 or 2 possession games throughout. South Florida maybe goes up by 6. Then Michigan State goes up by 4 or 5, just, back and forth, back and forth. But again, comes down to some steady guard play. And Jeremy Fears is to me, clearly the best player in the game, at least on the perimeter. Say what you will about him and the shenanigans that he does. But I think he's going to be a pretty hard out here. Now, they will put Wes Enos on him, and that's, most likely, at least for part of the game. And that's going to definitely, cause some frustrations. But he's such a good facilitator that if they bring Enos over or they, even try to double team, he's just going to pass out of it. Jackson Keeler can hit threes. We've seen Kurt Tang start to step up here lately. And I think that's ultimately what ends up being the difference. And I do think Michigan State kind of staves off elimination. And this is kind of like a really big gut check game that prepares them for what's looming in the next round, which is probably UConn. So I do think the Spartans beat South Florida, but I wouldn't be surprised if South Florida wins either. What do you think?
Yeah, this is also a theoretical, just strategical type of deal for me with making brackets. Is I liked South Florida over Louisville. I still think they're probably the underdog there. I do think they can pull the upset, but it's one where I'm not going to then take them the next round in case I get it wrong in the first round. If Louisville wins that game, then obviously I'm losing the next round as well if I advance South Florida. If it is South Florida, Michigan, I think or Michigan State, I think you kind of broke it down already. Michigan State probably has the chops to win that, but just from a theoretical and strategical perspective, I'm not going to double up on South Florida here. So I'm going to advance Michigan State.
All right, let's do it. And I got Lambos and Legos in the chat. Said he's made a live. Let's go. Good day today. Glad to hear that. Thank you for checking us out. Lots of support, and I appreciate all the interactions you guys are giving us. Again, that social currency, it helps us a lot, actually. All right, 10 seed UCF against 2 seed UConn. Man, this region, I tell you what, this region is absolutely nuts. I think UConn just goes, like, for lack of a better term, completely scorched earth. Very disappointing Big East final. It's all, people were talking about after it happened. And I think this is a game in which no matter what the line is set at, odds makers are going to be wrong. I think this is a game that UConn runs rampant. Like if UCF does pull off the slight upset over UCLA, I feel like it's one of those games where it either goes overtime or it's a last minute shot, and they're just, they're completely gassed out and don't have much left. Now Johnny Dawkins is a good coach, no matter what anyone says. But I feel like once you wake up that beast that is Coach Hurley, and gets that familiar fire back in his eyes, this is going to be the moment. This will be the game that reminds people, like, holy shit, this UConn team is for real. We should probably stop doubting them immediately. I'm talking 20-point blowout over UCF, in my opinion. So what do you think?
Yeah, for me, whether it's UCF or UCLA, because I know I lean to UCLA, it doesn't really matter in this spot. I'm going to trust Hurley. I'm going to trust UConn. I'm going to trust the veterans, and just trust the fact that they're going to have the home crowd there too. This is regionally or geographically, it's a big edge for UConn. That's the one thing about UConn. Of course, they probably wanted to be a 1 seed, but I could be wrong on this, but I think being a 2 seed actually kind of locked up the geographical advantage for them. So it was almost a little bit of we gave up the 1 seed, but we got our home fans behind us. So, whether it's UCLA or UCF, I'm pretty confident in UConn as well.
Yeah, their fans travel pretty well, but you're right. They got some regionality there. And when we get to it, Houston as well, in the next rounds, they make it Sweet 16 and beyond as a 2 seed. They've got a favorable home look as well. All right, so we'll move on to the Sweet 16 matchup here, which pits the 1 seed, which we said it's kind of a 50-50 flip. You made a compelling argument for Kansas. So we'll say they do take on the 4 seed Kansas here. Marquee battle, Cameron Boozer, taking on Flory Badunga down low, or Zuby Ejiofor. To me, that, 2 future pros, regardless of what that matchup is. But this would be a matchup here against Kansas or St. John's where I think we see Isaiah Evans really steal the show. We saw him light it up a few games ago. Kansas being shorthanded. He had 21 real points in the first half. He can get extremely hot. I think more so it'd be a shock to St. John's if he got hot and made three out of his first 4, something like that. I think they would end up maybe not steamrolling St. John's, but really kind of controlling that one from start to finish. That may not be the case with Kansas necessarily. Where I worry with this one is the second chance, third chance opportunities, some of the hustle plays. Like I just feel like, sounds weird to say, but I feel like Duke would actually outwork Kansas a little bit here. And that's not a knock necessarily on Kansas. I just feel like the way that Duke's been prepared for this season and the way they're playing, that would be the case. So I do think Duke wins regardless of who it is. You probably feel the same, but I think you're a little higher on Kansas than I am. So why don't you kind of talk about this one a little bit?
I'm going to advance Duke, but I will say if it is Kansas in this spot, I do think that if Kansas makes it to the Sweet 16, they obviously would have had to play pretty well. Maybe not in the first round against Cal Baptist. They probably can play, a C-plus game and win that. But if they're going to beat St. John's, they're probably going to have to play, at minimum a B-plus game, if not an A game. And I think at that point, you might see a little momentum, especially, I keep bringing him up, but Darren Peterson, if we see him play full complement of minutes and he looks like himself, it's just a different team. And I think with that type of momentum that they carry through St. John's, it's an intriguing kind of contrarian pick. Like if I was in a bracket pool with, 500 people or something, it's a leverage spot that I might be interested in, but it is extremely risky. First of all, they have to get by Cal Baptist, then they have to get by St. John's, which it's going to be a war. And then they'd also have to get by Duke. So it's too much to ask for in just a simple bracket breakdown like this. But I just wanted to make that note for maybe a contrarian angle if you're in a really, really big pool. But for now, I have more confidence in Duke.
Yeah, and a lot of this will come down to, for me, if they do have Ngbangba, because rebounding wise, Duke does have a huge advantage with him. 8th in offensive rebounding efficiency, 7th in defensive rebounding efficiency per Ken Palm. Pull up Kansas, that number is significantly weaker. 223rd in offensive rebounding efficiency, only 169th in defensive rebounding efficiency. They have Badunga, sometimes Bryson Tiller, who's a young guy, and not a lot of else when it comes to that. So that's what I was kind of alluding to there with the rebounding, the hustle plays, and stuff like that. But if they don't have them, it does kind of tip the scales maybe slightly. And Kansas is 10th in overall defensive efficiency, so it's not like they can't D up the best teams in the country when they want to. And definitely a magnificent game either way. But yeah, we'll move Duke along here. I think that they're going to proceed. All right, moving on to the 3 versus 2 matchup here. Shot at the regional final against Duke to the winner. Michigan State, Tom Izzo, Mr. March, whether he's deserving of that nickname anymore or not is irrelevant. Taking on maybe the new Mr. March, Coach Hurley, Dan Hurley, not Bobby. Great matchup overall. One that I'd actually be more amped for this one, I think, than the Duke Kansas / Duke St. John's, which is going to be a great game, and I'm definitely going to watch. But this is just like a gargantuan Final Four caliber type of battle. 2 of the most storied programs, Michigan State from the past, maybe UConn from the present. And I just feel like, it's going to be a game, a coaching battle. I really like watching basketball games that are, you can tell like it's a chess match. Like, yes, the players have to execute, but you can tell, I get hyped. I don't know about you, a well-executed out of bounds play out of the timeout. Like that kind of stuff just gets me completely lit, like super hyped. A defensive stop, you can just tell like, oh, they're running the offense extremely well. Their back cuts, there's just a lot of stuff that goes into it that you can tell the coach has his fingerprints all over. And these are 2 coaches that are very good at game planning. But I think Dan Hurley's just in this Terminator mode. Like he's just going to put himself in that Michael Jordan mindset, FU mode, if you will, as Bill Simmons used to say. And this will be a masterpiece. Like this will be the game that we come away from the tournament talking about for a long time. Like, yes, the Final Four, the winner of it, of course, but we'll go back to this game and talk about, Jesus, this was an amazing game to see. And I feel like it'll be one of those ones where it just, Twitter and socials and IG and everywhere, it's just like a full-blown frenzy and completely crazy. So I do think it's a defining game of the tournament one way or another, but I do have UConn beating Michigan State if we are blessed with this matchup. Are you in agreement there, or do you love your Spartans here?
No, this is where my hatred of Michigan State's going to come through. Definitely going to advance UConn here. I think Michigan State's a little bit too reliant at times on Fears, I believe. And they like to push the ball after made baskets. They're a pretty good rebounding team, but it's just they don't really have that much going for them. Fears oftentimes tries to kind of do it all himself. He draws a lot of fouls, gets to the line a lot, but I don't think Danny Hurley's going to be, phased by that. I think he's going to put together a good game plan to kind of try to make other players besides Fears beat them, and just not convinced that the Coopers and the Kohlers and the Cars, I mean, they're all decent forwards, but they kind of interchange big games here and there. But I think if they could just limit Fears a little bit, you're not going to be that out coached. Usually Izzo will run circles around more inexperienced coaches or maybe mid-major teams, but I don't think he's going to be running circles around Hurley and UConn, especially, like we said, the geographical advantage. So I'm going to go UConn.
Yeah, and when you look at UConn's path, like Furman, UCF, even UCLA, Michigan State, like you had mentioned Fears, they rely on him heavily. Furman, they rely on Wilkins heavily. UCLA, like you take Dent out of the equation and, they've got guys, but, going to rely on Sky Clark to run the offense, probably not. UCF, Thomas Folks, you take him out of the equation, things fall apart. They're capable of just, shutting down that key cog facilitator type, and their path is full of those types. So, I think UConn's going to be up for the challenge. So that brings us to the regional final, a spot in the Final Four up for grabs. Duke, the number 1 overall seed. Duke having to play, my God, a tough TCU team in the second round, possibly St. John's and or Kansas. And then, a shot at the Final Four goes through, a team that's won 2 of the last 3 natties in UConn. It doesn't get more brutal than that. How do you see this game going?
This one's going to be a war. Duke, UConn with Final Four trip at stake. I do think we might see it as the tournament develops, just the health. We've talked about it with Duke. their health is their one major question mark and one major blemish that they have, maybe holding them back a little bit. I'm not sure that I'm that concerned about it unless we get something like Gumba doesn't play the first couple of rounds and he game time decision every day and isn't going out there. But I do think at this point I just slightly trust Duke. I think they're more well-rounded. UConn, they go through stretches offensively where they can struggle a bit. They turn the ball over a little bit as well. And I think the one thing about Duke is when you look at Duke, you don't see they weren't like last year's team where they were super flashy with Cooper Flag. They didn't have elite outside shooting, although Evans can shoot the ball a little bit, but they just play really good defense. I think the defense is what's allowed them to remain elite this year without looking as flashy and as athletic as past teams. So at this point, if Duke's already at this part of the bracket, you have to assume that their health is probably okay. So I just slightly lean Duke here.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that Foster's going to play at all. I mean, broken foot is a broken foot, but I do think Patrick will have attempted to play by this time because they do really need him. I think UConn. I think Duke's the right pick. I think UConn will be able to rattle Duke in a way that we haven't really seen at all this season. Even in the close games Duke's been in, they've never really truly been rattled, right? And I think it's one of those situations where we go into halftime. Maybe UConn has a couple of point lead and defensively, and it's just been a masterpiece. And Shire goes into it. A lot of people talking, the media talking at halftime, is he going to fizzle out here again? But he goes into it, makes the necessary adjustments. And I think this is a spot where, they just lean on Cameron Boozer. You just force him the ball and let him go to work. Terrace Reed, as much as I like Terrace Reed from a fantasy perspective, grabs a million rebounds, he gets double-doubles all the time. Like, I don't think this is a game where he can keep himself out of foul trouble. I think he's going to try and do too much. And Boozer's extremely good at drawing fouls, and I think he'll just work his way through that UConn front court in the second half especially, and that's going to lead to a situation where they just don't have enough. Braylon Mullins will have to have a big game, but I think defensively they can rattle him. And I just think that, yeah, Duke is the right side here, and Duke does go to the Final Four out of what I am calling the death region, 100%. And I had a little note about, I kind of wrote, when I do these previews and I write them, I like to have these kind of, stories or talk about what will happen. And I had a note about in the post game, Dan Hurley graciously offering a handshake and congratulating the victors. But in the post-game interview, slipping in some well-placed snarkiness to make it crystal clear that he's not happy with the way things worked out, and the refs especially, which may or may not lead to some fines, but he's perfectly capable of paying those. But yeah, I like Duke in this one. Let's advance them to the Final Four. The East Region champions. What a freaking side of the bracket. All right, let's move on to the South here. Florida locking down that fourth number one spot. They are taking on the winner of tomorrow's game between Lehigh and my Prairie View A&M Panthers, the 8th seed, who won their conference tournament. The Gators, they don't have we'll get it out of the way right now because I don't want to harp on it every single round. Everybody knows, but their guard play simply not what it was last year. You only have to watch a handful of games to know that. Xavier Lee, as good as he was at Princeton over the years, it was a huge culture shock to him playing at this SEC level. It took him quite a while to get acclimated. The pressure it put on Boogie Fland as kind of more of a secondary option at Arkansas in the past, and it just didn't work out. And it looked like they were going to be kind of that second tier, like still a good team, but maybe a 3 or 4 seed. But Lee definitely turned it around faster than I thought he would, especially once they got towards mid-SEC play. And it's been good enough. I'm still not confident in the guard play. I think that most teams they face in this region, which does feel a little softer for whatever reason, they'll have a clear advantage in the front court. But I do have some questions about the guard play here with Lee and Bland. They don't have a Walter Clayton. They don't have a Will Richard. They don't have a Elijah Martin. That was a once in a generation group. That was like the Baylor guards the year they won. Like, you just don't see that type of guard play consistently. So I do want to shout out Prairie View A&M. I think they're going to beat Lehigh. I'm betting them. I think they're plus 3.5 right now. So I'll make that clear right now. But Florida's going to knock off the 16 seed here. It would be, truthfully, Prairie View A&M's awesome, by the way. You guys are going to love watching them tomorrow. This would be, of all the 16s, you know, all three, there's two of them in the men's side, one in the women's side. They were shocking. But this would be the ultimate shocker. If A&M or Lehigh knocked off Florida, I think it would take me a full week to pick my jaw up off the ground and figure out what the hell happened. So we'll advance Florida. I know you'll feel the same, but excited for the play-in game. Not sure where you are at that, but you see 99% of the public picking Florida to advance this 116. You okay with that, or should we consider the 16 seed here?
No, Florida wins, but I will say the Prairie View A&M game tomorrow, somebody's going to be up by 20, and the other team's going to come back, and it's going to be interesting at the end. I just know that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's going to be Lehigh. Lehigh's going to build a lead. That Nazir Whitlock, who hits buzzer beaters like it's his job, they're going to get out to a hot start. I feel the same way. You're 100% right. And then after halftime, Prairie View A&M, which as the 8th seed, they're 18-17. They've won 7 games in a row, by the way. They play at this extremely fast pace. They're top 25 in tempo. And they're just going to do some very fun things. I am excited. The name to know on Prairie View A&M is Dante Horn. He is just amazing. The Horn versus Nazir Whitlock matchup is going to be quite exciting. I can't wait for this one. I wish the 2-game slate would have been a part of the NIT slate for more ownership spread out or whatever. But yeah, I'm pretty damn excited for this one. All right, we'll move on to the 8-9 matchup here, which pits Clemson versus Iowa. 2 teams that have frustrated us immensely for DFS purposes. But when we look at this particular matchup, it's another one to me that feels like a coin flip. I believe it'll stay as a 1-possession nail biter type of game from start to finish. Now, Iowa does have the best player on the floor in Bennett Sturts. Drake won a game last year in the tournament with basically the same group that's at Iowa now. They all left Drake to go to Iowa with their coach. But I don't think it would be smart to fully count out Coach Brownell and Clemson. And Clemson, Brownell, I mean, he was on the hot seat as early as 3 or 4 years ago, red hot, on his way out the door. He suddenly turned things around, has a comfortable contract with Clemson, and will not be going anywhere anytime soon. But with that being said, I'm a little bit clouded on this one, so I'm hoping you can give us some clarity on which way we want to go here between Iowa and Clemson. What do you think?
I have a reasonable lean with Iowa. You kind of mentioned it. Iowa, well, actually both of these teams, they kind of win ugly. They're not fast-paced teams. It's not going to be pretty. It's probably going to be one of the more boring games in terms of, just watching the game throughout. Could be close at the end, which makes it intriguing. But I'm just going to trust Sturts here with the ball in his hands in a tight game. We saw him do it last year with Drake. We saw Ben McCollum do it as the head coach. So that combination has done this before in big spots. And if the game comes down to 1 possession like we think it will, I just trust Sturts over anybody else.
Yeah, he'll be, and it'll be a situation where, they got to make free throws. He'll be the one that does it. The total in this one's only 128.5. I think it was at 130 at one point. The angle here is the first half under, which is 59.5 currently. I think it's going to be like a 22-18 type of first half. So I will be taking the first half under 59.5 there. Shop around, but that's the angle for this one. But yeah, I agree. You see 58% of the public there on Iowa, and I think that's probably the right decision. Clemson, they've got some pieces. They don't have any stars. We've seen Godfrey step up from time to time. We know Ace Buckner has a chance to be really good, but overall the team's just, for lack of a better term, pretty bland. Not that Iowa is saucy, but I do lean Iowa as well. All right, moving on, we have another 5-12 matchup here, and it's always fun to pick these upsets. McNeese did do it last year. They got their doors blown off. What was it? 2 years prior against Gonzaga, and I was a victim of that one because I thought they would have a chance against Gonzaga. I was wrong. And then the game against Clemson, I was worried, and they ended up beating Clemson by 2. And then they weren't competitive against Purdue. That McNeese team was better. They have some of the same pieces for sure, but Quadir Copeland was on that team. He's now at NC State, which I guess they went home early. They had Christian Shumate, a couple of other guys, Sincere Parker, who's at Memphis. It was just overall a better program, or a better roster, I should say. I don't have much faith in them to beat Vanderbilt here. Had they gotten a different 5, such as Texas Tech, then I think the conversation would be a little bit different. I actually feel like the Commodores are being a little undervalued here, and I suspect that a large number of the public will actually probably pick McNeese based on the fact that they won a game last year. But I don't see it. I think Duke Miles, Tyler Tanner, that's just way too good of a backcourt for anything that McNeese State will be able to do defensively. They've got their guy, Amir Aura Khan, back, the boombox kid, but I don't think they have a very long stay this year. So it is Vanderbilt for me. What do you think?
Vanderbilt for me as well. You mentioned it already. They probably were undervalued here. They probably could have been maybe even a 3 seed, if not a 4. I think most people agree probably a 4, but it was pretty wild to see them fall to the 5 line, especially when talking about how those Saturday, Sunday games are supposed to mean something. Beat Florida, didn't really move up, whereas Nebraska finished the season kind of cold, and they find themselves ahead of Vanderbilt in the seed line. But yeah, no, I think Vanderbilt's not even a typical 5 seed, so this isn't a typical 5-12. It's more like a 4-12, maybe even a 3-12. So Vanderbilt for sure.
Yeah, I would agree. I actually think McNeese is a little weaker than a 12 would typically be as well. So Vanderbilt will advance them. Takes us to the 4-13 matchup between the Nebraska Cornhuskers, the Troy Trojans, which are getting healthy quickly. At least the public on the CBS side are very confident in Nebraska. Nearly 90% of brackets selecting Nebraska, 14th in the net. Troy, atrocious. But you know what? Troy played extremely well early in the season. They pushed USC to multiple overtimes, and it almost seems like Troy plays up or down to their competition. So I'm actually a little more confident in Troy being competitive in this game than I think most people are, based on a few things. But let's get your take on this one first before I deliver some actionables here.
I don't know if I'm going to do it on this show, but I know I'm going to have some Troy in some brackets. Simply, Troy beat San Diego State this year. They're a repeat qualifier from last season, so they've been here. They played USC tough. I think you just mentioned that as well. I also think Nebraska, they have a lot of pressure on them. They still haven't won. They're the only Power 5 or Power Conference team without a tournament win still. So I think that's, no matter how much Fred Hoiberg says that they're not thinking about that, they're definitely thinking about it. So there is a lot of pressure there. I do think they're the superior team. It does seem like the public's even more confident than I thought. Usually 13 seeds at times will get some steam behind them, especially ones that have had success against, pretty decent teams. So Troy, I have advancing in some brackets, but for the sake of this one, I'm going to go conservative here and say Nebraska finally uses that motivation to get that first win off their back.
Yeah, I could definitely see it. Kind of a bigger piece of news here for Troy is the fact that senior Theo Sang, who has missed essentially most of February and all of March to this point, is a game time decision upgrade. So there's a good chance he plays. Kind of an important rebounding option. He was 6th in the Sun Belt in defensive rebounding efficiency. So having him back is an important thing. I've heard several people reference the fact that Troy, they were not a popular upset pick last year, but there were definitely people who thought they could cover and win, and they got absolutely blown up by Kentucky. And a lot of the same pieces are there. Thomas Dowd, Cooper Campbell, Victor Valdez, Theo Sang. They lost a lot to Jackson Fields, who I believe went to West Virginia, Tatum Connerway, who went to Indiana, as we know, and Marcus Rigby, who hit UT Arlington, and Miles Rigby, who went to Tulsa. We saw him today. So they lost a lot of pieces, but they're formidable. They have enough from last year, experience-wise. Nebraska, feel good story. Hoiberg, they won the crown last year, kind of, springboarded them into a very hot start to the season. I don't know. I feel like this is a weird spot for them. Rink Mast was unbelievable in the first part of non-con. He had a triple-double in like the first 3 games. not 3 times, but in one in the first 3 games. And then he kind of disappeared. Like we never talk about him for DFS. We never use him. We never regret it. Peyton Sandford puts up some big scoring games. My man Braden Frager, he can get hot. But I do feel like this is the spot to look at for an upset. Of all the 13 seeds, I do think this is the one. Had Cal Baptist gotten this matchup against Nebraska, I would be kind of banging the drum on them as well. I think Nebraska is just susceptible. It is important that we note 13 seed has beaten a four times since the pandemic alone. Now, none of them advanced last year. It was a pretty boring tournament. I think most of us would say there wasn't a lot of drama early. We had some great games as the tournament went on. That's kind of the trade-off. But I think we're going to get back to some drama here. Sun Belt champs, they kind of just took care of business. Granted, when you're a top 2 seed in the Sun Belt, you get to avoid the chaos of the first 4 or 5 days. Thomas Swout, he was a no-show against Kentucky in the tournament last year. He won't be this year. I personally think he has kind of that March moment, one shining moment montage clip where he just delivers this stupid game, 30 points, just ridiculous numbers against Nebraska. Whether that turns into a win or not remains to be seen. But I personally do think Troy beats Nebraska here. Now, I don't think either of these teams, I'll just kind of give a preview, get past Vanderbilt. So it's not really that huge of a deal one way or another. We'll go ahead and advance Nebraska. You make a good case there. But as far as 13-4s go, I think that's the one that's going to happen. All right, let's move on to North Carolina, the 6 seed taking on the 11 seed VCU. You kind of married into the Carolina, I say that in figuratively, married into the Carolina family with your girl loving North Carolina. So you've become a North Carolina fan. So you're very familiar with this team. This is another one of those injury situations. We've got 3 or 4 teams where it's like, man, I just can't get over the fact. And that's that they don't have Caleb Wilson. Now they've been without him for what seems like forever at this point, and they've adjusted and they've had that time to come together. But in a tournament without your star, I just feel like that's going to be very difficult to overcome. So how are you seeing this one playing out? And ultimately, who do you like to advance?
The long-term prospects for North Carolina are bleak for me, but I do think I actually like the fact that everybody seems to be on VCU here, almost advancing VCU automatically. In fact, I haven't really seen anybody picking North Carolina at all. I do think North Carolina will use that as fuel. I think they do have a weapon down low with Visser. We could step out and hit threes as well. So I think that could be a bit of a problem for VCU. VCU's been hot. They've won 15 of their last 16, but they couldn't get by St. Louis. I don't necessarily think St. Louis is a better team than North Carolina, even down Caleb Wilson. So I think, just logically speaking, I still think North Carolina is a better team. I just kind of like the fact that everybody's picking against them. So I do like North Carolina here in this one. It's not a biased pick. I just truly think they do win this game, but I do not think they win the following round, assuming it's Illinois, which we'll get to soon.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. My thing with VCU is they're extraordinarily deep. I mean, they can legitimately throw 10, 11, 12 bodies at you, and they don't have a huge drop off, especially in the perimeter. And Terrence Hill, who they bring off the bench, I mean, he would start for probably 60 to 70% of programs out there, high majors included. So being able to bring an asset like that off the bench is just a huge deal. VCU, you mentioned, they did struggle. They lost to St. Louis twice this year, but just rolled through the A-10 otherwise, especially late. I think they lost only one time since January 14th, which is pretty astronomically impressive. They get to the foul line at a good rate, but they're really good free throw shooters when they get there as well. And if this game is close, as we expect it to be, and we get into a situation where it turns into a free throw shooting contest, I do lean towards the Rams there because it doesn't matter really who you foul. You don't want to put Terrence Hill there. He shoots almost 90%. Lazar, he shoots about 82%. Brandon Jennings, another one, 86%. Nick Lewis, 75%. There's no guys that you would prefer to foul. Michael Bell shoots 50%, but he's not going to be out there in crunch time because of it. Barry Evans, same thing. I do kind of lean towards VCU. You're right. People are talking like it's a foregone conclusion. I'm not necessarily talking like that, but I do in my FDN bracket / write-up feel pretty good about VCU, and I do have them in the Sweet 16. But for the purpose of this bracket, you know, I think it's a lot closer than people are talking. I certainly don't think it's going to be any kind of easy game, but I do think in the late game, which is what's going to get to that point of the last 5 minutes, I do favor VCU for those reasons alone. But we'll advance North Carolina. I like it. Especially with the mantra or the bulletin. I'm a big bulletin board material guy. I say that a lot to you guys in the Discord. Like, if you can use any kind of, you know, naysayer, doubting, you know, anything at all that you can use. I don't know. I just come from that 90s era. Like I mentioned, Jordan, you know, pulling that out and using it as fuel. So I do like that angle. From a betting perspective, I might even look to bet North Carolina, but pick VCU. So we'll go North Carolina here on our show bracket. All right, Illinois versus Penn, the Ivy champs. What a hell of a game by former Duke/Virginia transfer TJ Power. 44 points and 14 rebounds. Impressive as that is, Penn was without their best player. Technically, as good as TJ Power is, he's not even considered their best player. That belongs to Ethan Roberts, who had a concussion a while back and was having a flare-up of symptoms. They do think he's going to be ready for this Illinois game, and they're going to need him. This is, again, one of those spots where I'd love to pick Penn. I can't do it. I think the offense for Illinois is too good, but I do think this is probably a top 3, for me at least, spot to bet the spread. 24.5 points. I mean, get out of here with that. Illinois has blown the doors off some teams, but Penn, you know, this will be one. Like, I think Penn will hang with them for a while. I think they'll probably at one point fall behind by a large margin, but I don't think it's going to be 30 plus. And even if it gets to that 25, 26, 27 range, I think Illinois kind of calls off the dogs and Penn chips away at that deficit in the last few minutes. So betting perspective wise, 24.5 points is a stupid number to lay. Give me that all day for Penn. Fran McCaffrey, there's going to be a lot of points in this one. The total is only 150.5 as well. Hello, I'm taking the over on that. Fran McCaffrey is not known for his defense, especially in the latter years of his career. They play fast. Illinois will love that. There's going to be a lot of fantasy goodness for this one. But yeah, I will do the responsible thing and push Illinois to the next round, even though I love this Penn team, especially for helping me cash a plus 700 Ivy League ticket. You mentioned Illinois against North Carolina as a potential matchup, so I know you're picking Illinois as well. Do you think there's any chance at all Penn makes it a game? And then if not, what do you think it's kind of just a game that Illinois just kind of gets through and moves on with their health intact?
Yeah, no chance for me. Illinois' offense is too good. They're the tallest team in the country. You got a lot of Europeans on that squad, obviously very skilled. So no chance. I do think spread-wise, 24 points is a lot. So maybe Illinois calls off the dogs. Like, there's a lot of angles that you could and arguments you could make for Penn there, but no, Illinois is winning the game for sure.
All right, we will advance the 3 seed. Illinois takes us to the bottom part of the what are we in the South region here? Just check the comments here. Cream City says VCU will beat North Carolina. You need Caleb Wilson. When you said St. Louis, that's closer to a pick'em. Yeah, not the Caleb. I'm really hung up on the Caleb Wilson thing. I'm gonna have to get over that though, probably. All right, 7 seed St. Mary's taking on the 10 seed Texas A&M. You had a pretty good read on St. Mary's, a 3-bid WCC. You love to see it. What do you foresee happening here, and who do you like to advance?
Contrasting styles for sure. I mean, St. Mary's wants to play slow. They want to defend. They want to play the game in the 50s, maybe in the 60s, whereas Texas A&M wants to pick up full court. They want to do buckyball. They want to speed up, have as many possessions as possible. So it'll be interesting to see who can control the tempo early. I feel like it's easier to control the tempo when you play slow because you can kind of just physically slow the game down. I know Texas A&M will probably try to press, but St. Mary's is a very disciplined team. I don't think they'll turn the ball over too often. They have a lot of ball handlers. Mikey Lewis can bring it up. Joshua Dent can bring it up. I do think St. Mary's also, if this game is close, is the best free throw shooting team in the country. I think they shoot about 80% from the line. And I do like the emergence of Mikey Lewis of late. We've seen big games from him in the past, but it's been very inconsistent. He tends to disappear. But ever since that little run before that Gonzaga rematch where they beat them in the final game of the regular season, Mikey Lewis has really kind of taken the alpha role, which isn't anything negative about Joshua Dent. I think Joshua Dent could steal the alpha role back potentially, which isn't a bad thing because he's a good player as well. But they now seem to have two guards that can really be alphas if necessary. And if the game is coming down to the end, I do trust their free throw shooting. And St. Mary's does a really good job of winning in the first round. They haven't had much success getting the second weekend. I think 2010 was the last time they did it. But I do like them in this game. I think they'll control the tempo. I think they'll make their free throws. And I think Mikey Lewis playing the way he is the difference maker.
Yeah, you could argue that the Aggies have, more athleticism. Rashawn A.G. is a problem down low, but I agree. The two poise, Coach Bennett's a machine. He's going to dominate the WCC for all of eternity when Gonzaga leaves next year. So let's go ahead and advance them. Takes us to the 2 versus 15, Houston versus Idaho. We don't have to get too in depth here. I just realized that time's not on our side right now. Houston is going to blow the doors off of Idaho. I'm on like a myriad of things here. Houston, 23 and a half, minus 23 and a half. Idaho team total under 55 and a half. Like the Idaho's in the tournament for the first time since the 90s. It's just hi, you're here, welcome, and time for you to go back to Spudland. I doubt you see it any different here besides a Houston blowout.
No, I love the story for Idaho. I did read an article on ESPN where they talked about, here's news and notes about every school, their mascot, their enrollment size, famous alumni. And I was a little bit irked as a Packers fan that Jerry Kramer was not listed as one of the famous alumni from Idaho. I mean, how many people are notable alumni from Idaho? So probably go after that writer for ESPN, but now Houston wins.
For sure. Yeah. First tournament since 1990 for Idaho. So a great story, as you mentioned. All right. So we'll pop to the top of the South here. 1 seed Florida taking on 9 seed Iowa. The glaring thing is Bennett Sturtz by far the best guard in this game. And I think he's probably going to have, I don't want to say use the word easy, but he's going to have a relatively comfortable time putting Xavier Lee and Boogie Flan in a blender. But the front court edge is squarely with Florida, and I have a sneaky suspicion that Iowa's front court is just going to pick up a ton of fouls, which ultimately leads to Florida probably moving on here. Do you have a different take with Sturtz there? I mean, Florida would love to have Bennett Sturtz on their team. I know that, but do you see this one playing out any differently, or are you firmly on the Gators here?
No, and Iowa just won't have enough offense. It's pretty much the Bennett Sturtz show. The bigs are okay. Fulgaris is probably the better of the two bigs, but I don't see Maniau or Fulgaris holding down that front court of Florida.
It takes us to 5 seed Vandy versus 4 seed Nebraska. And you can see here the public on this potential matchup, almost 40% on Nebraska, nearly 60 on Vanderbilt. A potential rematch looming, a rubber match, if you will, between Vandy and Florida. I like Vanderbilt. I think that they'll be facing Troy personally, but even if they play Nebraska, I'm pretty comfortable with them in their guard play. I think Tanner and Miles are just so much better than people give them credit for outside of their fan base and DFS players. They're really good, and I think they're better than the Hoiberg grouping there for Nebraska. So I would pick Vanderbilt. Are you on board with that?
Same thing. And we already talked about how we're much more confident Vanderbilt winning in the first round than we are with Nebraska. We think Troy has a chance. So if we think Nebraska's a little bit of a shaky pick in the first round, might as well go with Vanderbilt since we're much more confident in them at getting to the spot anyway.
That takes us to the 6 versus 3 matchup, North Carolina versus Illinois. Give it to us here. What do you think? It looks like 70% of the public on Illinois compared to about 25% on North Carolina. If this matchup does materialize, what do you think?
I'm actually surprised it's only 71%. It's big a fan of North Carolina as I am. There's just no way. They don't have the size. They don't have the horsepower on offense. Illinois is a team that in some brackets I'm going to take to the Final Four. So there's no way I'm confident in North Carolina winning this game as unfortunate as that is.
Yeah, I would agree at this point. This particular matchup, I just don't see it. The Ivicevic brothers too, I think would just kind of give Carolina a really hard time on the glass in this one. We'll move Illinois over, and then a really, great matchup between two great coaches, St. Mary's versus Houston here. Another one that I would just be attacking the under in. I'm pretty high on Houston getting, potentially getting back to the Final Four, maybe even the Natty. So I do like them over St. Mary's here, but it's too bad that St. Mary's has this as a second round opponent looming, because I would like to see them make a Sweet 16 and make a potential run here, but I don't think it happens here. What's your opinion?
It's just going to be a little tough for them against Houston. I know they can get by Texas A&M, but the physicality and athleticism of Houston is totally different animal. I'd love to see St. Mary's win, and regardless who wins this game, I'm going to be happy just from a fan's perspective, but Houston's the smart play.
And that takes us to the rubber match, 1 versus 5 in the Sweet 16, Florida versus Vanderbilt. I think we get the revenge here from the Gators. Again, these two teams get to know each other extremely well, and I think it could teeter one way or the other. I just think there's going to be something that happens here. Early foul trouble to a key player, God forbid an injury, just, maybe a momentum changing, awful officiating decision, something that turns the tide here. But ultimately, Florida, with their experience, is going to edge out the Commodores. But I would be giddy about a Vanderbilt win. I honestly, truly would. But I just don't think that they're going to make it here against Florida. What do you think?
I also don't think that Vanderbilt necessarily exposed Florida in that game. I think it was more of just a one-off. So I don't think this is a situation where, Vanderbilt figured them out or anything. I think Florida will be, trying to avenge that loss. Like you said, Florida's a superior team. I don't think there's any way that they could really be exploited here by Vanderbilt other than the guards. But no, I'm going to stick with Florida just like you.
Yeah, and in that game, Vandy they started hot and they finished hot. They shot nearly 50% from long range. They got to the foul line. They shot 91% on 23 attempts. It was just like they got out in front, and it felt like Florida kind of made, I don't want to say they gave up. They certainly didn't, but I think they made a conscious decision that, we're going to still give an effort, but we need to be healthy. We're probably not in any danger of losing a 1 or 2 seed. I'm not sure they put forth maybe maximum effort in that game. All right, so we will advance Florida to the Elite Eight, where they will take on the winner of Illinois versus Houston. In this potential matchup, Houston's defensive style, I think Illinois' offense, it's juggernaut-like, but Houston's defense is just a completely different animal, and I have some major doubts that the Illini, especially being led by a freshman, albeit an amazing freshman in Keaton Wagler, will handle the championship caliber experience of this Houston roster, which, has majority, sans 1 or 2 pieces from last year's magnificent title, runner-up team. What do you think in this one?
This one, I'm a little concerned about Houston here, actually, and I'm surprised to see the 65-21 edge. This is a spot in the bracket. It's one of 2 real pivot points in the brackets. We'll get to another one in the next quadrant. But if I'm making multiple brackets, I'm splitting the difference and taking Illinois and some of them, Houston and some of the others. I really do think Houston might be in trouble here. But let's advance them for now. Let's just hope that defensively they have enough to slow down this Illini attack. I think the fact that Illinois is the tallest team in the country makes me a little worried because Houston likes to get on the glass. But for now, let's use the tournament experience and the motivation from last year to just slightly move Houston into the next round.
All right, let's do it. And that brings us to Florida versus Houston for a date in the Final Four with Duke. Who do you like here?
Now, I know we just said that I have concerns about Houston, but if they are in this spot, then I will take them. I think if they get by Illinois, some of the concerns that I had coming into the tournament won't be there as much. I do think we talked about revenge of Florida over Vanderbilt. There's probably a revenge aspect for Houston over Florida after what happened. I want to see Emmanuel Sharp hit a big shot in this game, almost as redemption for him. I just love Houston. I do think Florida's not having as good guard play this time around is the difference.
That's exactly what I feel and what I wrote up in the FTN regional breakdowns that I did. I think Florida, the opponents prior to this spot, like they can get away with moderate guard play. I think the cracks finally start to show in a matchup like this. The emergence, the offensive emergence of JoJo Tugler recently, who I've loved Tugler for many years, but he's been a fouler, shot blocker, rebounder. He's never really been an offensive weapon, but he suddenly got post moves and like this offensive surge of confidence that he has kind of strengthens my own confidence in them possibly beating Florida. I think the guard play, levers heavy towards Houston. Kingston Flemings, we know, is great. Manuel Sharp and Milos Uzan have that experience. Chris Senek in the 4 spot, he's got his moments. So I really like the balance that Houston has here, and I think that ultimately they're just going to be too tough. Rematch of the title game. There's that aspect. There's still some players from both sides. This will be a very important one. Florida will take it very seriously, but I think it's just going to be the backcourt of Florida that finally surrenders and ultimately knocks them out and ends their upset bid. So I'm with you there. Houston to the Final Four against the Duke. Let's move on to the West region, where Arizona is the number 1 seed there, taking on the Long Island Sharks, the NEC champions. Love the NEC, by the way. Tough spot here. I'd love to talk about LIU for a while. I would have liked them in the play-in game even. But Arizona, man, this Arizona team is absolutely legit. No letdown here. They've had some letdowns with some good teams, especially under Coach Tommy Lloyd before, but it doesn't happen here, not against the 16 seed, where 1% of the field is picking LIU. You ready to move Arizona forward here, or do you see history happening here again, just 3 years removed from Purdue's absolute shocking upset loss?
No, and I'm old enough to remember when LIU was actually the Blackbirds. But it doesn't matter if they're the Blackbirds or the Sharks. Blackbirds or Sharks, doesn't matter. Arizona.
All right, that takes us to an 8-9 game. I got to tell you, man, I'm going to lean on you for these 8-9 games because I really don't. Out of all the seed line matchups, I have the least confidence in these 8-9 games. Villanova as the 8 seed taking on Utah State as the 9 seed. Utah State being the MWC's only representative this year. A lot of people are down on the Mountain West. They've had some really atrocious appearances in the tournament recently. They did have the San Diego State run, which was majestic, but you take that out and there's been some very big disappointments for the Mountain West Conference. I'm seeing a lot of people on the Villanova side because of the front court that they have, the guard play, but Utah State has MJ Collins. He's experienced from Virginia Tech and Vanderbilt. They have some size of their own. I do lean Utah State, but curious what your take on this one is, because again, these 8-9 games are essentially coin flips to me, and I'm having a difficult time with them. What do you think?
I'm relatively confident in Utah State. I know I told myself I wouldn't trust the Mountain West in the tournament, but Utah State was just head and shoulders better than everybody in the conference this year, and it kind of shows since they're the only team that qualified. But Utah State, they can really defend too. They have some good guards, and Mason Falslev and Jake Collins. Elamine is kind of an X factor if he gets enough minutes, but Utah State, they can really hold their opponents into some pretty big droughts. I don't really see Villanova as an offensive firepower kind of team. I think Utah State will be able to hold them to some droughts and eke this one out with some decent guard play. And I do think they'll, being the lone Mountain West representative too, they were just clearly the best team. So I think we can throw the Mountain West narrative aside here and advance Utah State.
Yeah, and you can see on the CBS public picks here, 54% on Villanova, 46% on Utah State. That's just a small bit of leverage, because I do think in smaller pools, office pools, family pools, whatever, that the majority of people in that type of setting will take Villanova. So, taking Utah State, who I'm also, out of all the 8-9 matchups, I do feel probably the most confident in this one if I had to, say which one I think will definitely happen. So you might get a little bit of leverage there in the 8-9 spot with Utah State. But yeah, I agree with you. They should be moving on. All right, we have a 5-12 game here. Wisconsin, the Badgers, with the extraordinary play of John Blackwell and Nick Boyd, taking on the High Point Panthers, the champions out of the Big South. They have a lot of money for a low major team. High Point has NIL. They have donors, and they have people who want to see the program do well. They were 30-4 this year, 14 wins in a row. The last time they lost was January 14th against Winthrop. Logan Duncombe is the best player in the world. What can you do sometimes? But this is a great roster. They have done people always say like, oh, the NIL transfer portal era, the mid majors and low majors are dead. What are we going to do? But High Point does a great job of taking what I call P5 power conference cast-offs. They do a great job of that and developing them and giving them opportunity. Owen Aquino from Spain, played with Liberty last year, a few other smaller spots. Great player for them. Terry Anderson has been absolutely phenomenal as a senior. He played at Lamar for a few years. These are not high-powered teams, but just an example of guys that they grab. They have Conrad Martinez. He spent some uneventful years with Arizona. It's like a 9th, 10th man. He's playing good minutes there for them. Brendan Housen's brother is on this team. Chase Johnston, who has spent time with various teams like Florida Gulf Coast and Stetson. They have some really good talent, and they continue to do this year after year. With all that being said, and I see the line has moved away, like Wisconsin, at one point was laying, I think it was 11.5. Then I see out at 9. Like, if this line moves anymore, for me, it's a slam to the Badgers. And I'm not just saying that to butter you up because you're wearing your Badgers hat there. But I think Wisconsin is ultimately going to be too good for High Point. High Point has not been very good at covering, even in a weaker conference like this. I think they'll be all right and they'll play well for a bit. But this Wisconsin backcourt is on a whole nother level right now. Saw it firsthand against my Huskies just last week. I have no confidence in High Point. And ordinarily, this would be a spot where I'd be beating my chest and saying High Point's going to do it. But I'm taking a more analytical approach to things this year, and I just don't see them beating Wisconsin. What's your expert analysis as a Wisconsin fan on this game?
I'm just going to let my hat do the talking and say Badgers advance here. I think that the guards don't turn the ball over as much. I think that's going to be a big difference. And whether Nolan Winter plays or not, I mean, they played really well without him. So it's not like, it's not like a UCLA situation where if they're missing Dent, it's a completely different team. We've seen Wisconsin succeed. They beat Illinois even without Winter. They gave Michigan a run without Winter. So I'm not too concerned about Winter's status, although I do think he'll play.
That takes us to the 4-13 matchup here, a potential banger of a game in the second round between Wisconsin and Arkansas. Arkansas as the 4 seed, winners of the SEC tournament, taking on winners of the Big West tournament, Hawaii. You see that only 7% of the public on CBS thinks they have a chance against Arkansas. I'm pretty heavily on Arkansas here as well. Yes, they are shorthanded still. Hawaii, defensively, they're top 45 overall defensive efficiency, and they're top 15 to 20 in a lot of different defensive metrics. They also played a top 70 pace, so they're not afraid to get up and down. But this is going to be a very big disparity in athleticism, one in which I just don't think they can overcome. They have a lot of guys like Isaac Finlinson, Harry Ruliadev, who always beats his point prop of 9.5. Like if they lay the 9.5 for me on him, I'm just going to keep slamming the over. It's been paying the bills the last couple of weeks. A lot of gifted, high skill set type of offensive weapons, but they're the kind of guys you might see 10 to 15 years from now dominating at the YMCA. And that's not meant disrespectfully by any means. But I just don't know that they're going to be handling what Darius Cuff is going to be bringing to the table. The athleticism, the high ceiling, the absolute firepower, physicality of Arkansas, I think is just going to be way too much for Hawaii. Now, I am concerned. I mean, the public from CBS here doesn't look it, but I'm seeing a lot of talking heads in the media trying to pull for Hawaii being competitive in this one. And I'm just not certain that that is a real possibility. What do you think?
I don't know if there's a player in the country right now that I feel more confident in than Darius Acuff. I think he's the one player that can just completely just impact the game by himself. Like if he was out, I feel like the point spread would probably be a bigger shift in the point spread than any other team losing any other player, maybe other than a boozer off of Duke. So I just think there's no way they'll be able to handle him. Arkansas, Wisconsin is the matchup everybody wants to see, and it's the one we're going to get.
Yeah, I don't think any letdown. I think Wisconsin and Arkansas are both disciplined enough and have, I mean, obviously great coaching staffs that they won't look ahead. But yeah, the undeniably amazing second round matchup, possibly the best second round matchup of the tournament looms there if Arkansas and Wisconsin can actually advance. All right, the 6-11 seed BYU taking on Texas. We now know who they will play. And I said to you on Sunday during the reveal, could you see the winner of this NC State Texas game beating BYU and making a possible run? It didn't happen last year, but we have seen the play-in game winner 11 make runs to the Final Four, especially in recent years, twice in the past 4 years alone. But you told me emphatically no. Now that you know it's Texas and not NC State, do you still feel the same way, or have you changed your mind a little bit? I would probably say no, but I don't want to influence you. Texas defense really didn't look great tonight, and BYU's defense has been missing for weeks. So maybe an angle on the over, whatever that is. I haven't seen it yet, but who do you got here between BYU and Texas?
I still have BYU. I didn't really like what I saw from Texas today. The Swain didn't even really have that good of a game, and he's really going to have to do a lot of damage in this matchup if they want to win. I think BYU is just, again, almost similar with Arkansas. I don't know if there's any way for them to stop Debansa. And I think when push comes to shove, he's going to be able to carry the team. And even if he's having a little bit of an off night, Rob Wright can really do some damage as well. I think BYU wins this game. I just don't see anything. I didn't see anything tonight from Texas to really change my mind.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Defensively, they looked really bad. Texas was ahead by like 7 or 8 there late, and tried their best to piss it away. I mentioned Tremont Mark made like a pair of circus shots that he had no business making, but he did. Dylan Swain was awful on offense. I think he was like 2 for 12, 15 or some crazy number. Debansa, I think, can definitely hard carry here. My concern is the way that Texas plays and the way the games have been called early is some possible foul issues on both sides. But now that I've had a chance to see Texas play and what they're about, I no longer feel like as a play in 11, it's got to come from somewhere else. It's not going to come from them. So I'll move BYU over as well. I'm not that high on BYU without Richie Saunders, but I think Debansa, he's not going home in round 1. All right, Gonzaga, the 3 seed, taking on Kennesaw State, the 14. Kennesaw State gets here by winning the Conference USA tournament as the 6 seed. Pretty feel-good story as Adir Rahim, former Kennesaw State coach and South Florida coach, both of his teams, he passed away, unfortunately, both in the tournament. So a pretty feel-good story there. But asking them to play Gonzaga, who will be looking to restart their Sweet 16 streak after it ended unceremoniously last year. With probably a pretty comfortable win over Kennesaw State. I don't see any real fireworks here. This game strikes me as one where the first 5 minutes, Kennesaw State goes up like 11-2, and social start to hum a little bit, and then 10 minutes later, Gonzaga's up 15. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Kennesaw State's not going to have an answer for Graham Ike. I do like what I've seen out of Saint Supri. I forget how to pronounce his name, but he's emerged a little bit lately. And Gonzaga hasn't lost in the first round since 2008, I believe it is. And they also had that Sweet 16 streak that they're probably looking to regain. So Gonzaga wins this one pretty handily.
Yeah, and it'll be a good game for them to use, Braden Smith, Colgate transfer Braden Smith, and a couple of other guys that maybe don't have the same level of experience as the rest of the team and get them tournament minutes. So that'll be a good game for them to use that, especially in the second half. All right, that takes us to the 7-10 matchup, which does take place. All the chatter about this, Miami Hurricanes, 7 seed, coached masterfully by Jay Lucas this year, taking on the 10 seed Missouri Tigers. This game is in basically Missouri's, homeland or close to it at St. Louis. So a lot of the chatter is about how that's going to be so hard for Miami to overcome. This might be, we've only disagreed slightly on a couple, Troy, Nebraska, possibly a little, Ohio State, TCU, but nothing like super definitively. We're in our third region. I feel like this might be one we disagree on handily. Could be wrong though. Before I say who I like, you probably already know. It's pretty obvious. Where's your head at for this game?
I'm assuming you like Miami. I like Missouri, and it's not just because of the geographical, although I do think that plays a big. That's a big deal. I do think Missouri with Mark Mitchell, he's one of the most efficient players from 2-point range. I think Missouri's athleticism, the emergence of T.O. Barrett late in the season. I just think, and with the geographical edge, Miami's a team. You're definitely way higher on Miami than I have been all season. I'm also much higher in the SEC as a conference than the ACC. We saw a little bit tonight with Texas over NC State, but I think the geographical edge, athleticism, and just the grind of the SEC will be enough to get them past Miami.
And it's fair. Yeah, the having your basically a home game in the first round is just it's a huge edge, no doubt. Mark Mitchell is fantastic. I had him in my high stakes dynasty league for the last 2 years now. T.O. Barrett's a guy that we were on him early before the masses in DFS. When people were still trying to make Anthony Robinson a thing, we were like, T.O. Barrett's the guy here. Really like, what Missouri brings to the table. Going to be a close game, right? This should be like a 1-2 possession game. I don't think either team's going to blow the doors off of each other. We're talking about a 77, 75 type of game, 80 to 79, maybe even overtime. One thing that worries me tremendously for Missouri is the fact that if they have to shoot free throws at the end of the game, they don't have really anyone that you can feel great about shooting them. Mark Mitchell being, one of the higher foul rates or free throw rates in the SEC, meaning he does get to the line a fair amount, but he only makes 66% of them. T.O. Barrett, who hasn't gotten volume at the free throw line until the last month of the season, is shooting about 80%. Then you have a bunch of guys shooting 52% in Sean Phillips, 67% in Anthony Robinson. Jaden Stone is shooting 80%, but it's not really on volume. Trent Pierce is shooting around 69%, but again, not really on volume, so perhaps he's a little better. I foresee some problems here for Missouri in that regard. And we saw that. I mean, the game against Kentucky, they had some opportunities to close the gap there. They shot 65% from the free throw line, and in the second half, they shot 40% in that game. So that's the angle that I'm really looking at and saying, yeah, it's basically a home game, but if they end up going to the free throw line, who are they going to turn to for that? And Mitchell's the one who's going to get the majority of them, but again, he's shooting 70% at best, and I think that's a real bad area of their game that could rear their ugly head in a close game like this. They are a fairly sound offensive rebounding team. That's a big edge. They're top 50 in offensive efficiency, so they have a lot going for them there. And it's easy to kind of just write off Miami because they I was completely wrong about them against Virginia. They got absolutely detonated against. They had the good game against Louisville. They edged them out, but Malik Renew had probably the worst game of his career. And that's dating back to freshman season at Indiana where he played sparingly. I don't think he's ever had a game that bad. And I've seen a lot of Malik Renew in my life, and I really like him as a player. I'm a little biased towards him, yes, but I mean, awful performance. One of the worst. He wouldn't even shoot the ball. He was playing so bad. Without him, there's just no chance. I don't think we see a repeat of that. In fact, I think he has a pretty damn strong game. 20 plus points, 10 plus rebounds. The guard play of Miami, I do think it didn't look it against Virginia, but I do think it's better than Missouri's. Trey Donaldson has had a pretty damn good season. He was awful in the ACC tournament, but he has been good overall. But one key thing here, maybe even an X factor, is the fact that True Washington, the New Mexico transfer, who the first 2 months of the season was a starter, then he got hurt, missed a few games. They started bringing him off the bench in favor of the youngster Dante Allen. And really, True's injuries, I think, were a little worse than they were letting on. He was playing pretty sparingly there for a while, 10 minutes, 14 minutes, 3 minutes. But recently, He's been playing pretty heavy minutes, 26, 27, 29. And he's looked really good in that game. He had 13 against Virginia. Didn't do a whole lot else than that. But the Louisville game, he had 17 and 2 assists. Hit some timely threes there late. Off the bench. I mean, he could even probably start here. I think there's a possibility of that. But I think he's an X factor for this game. I do lean Miami because of the guard play. And I think that free throw disparity there is going to be too much for them to overcome. And when you look at Miami's free throw shooting, it hasn't been particularly great either. But I just feel like that they have enough in this spot to win. So we do have our first real major disagreement. It's all good. I don't know how far. I'll be curious to get your take here in a minute on Purdue. I'm going to move Miami across here, but we'll talk about it like it could be both. All right, 2 seed Purdue versus the 15 seed Queens. I wanted so badly for them to stay a 4 seed. Prior to the Big Ten tournament, they were like a last 3, first 4 type of situation and on the seed line, winning the Big Ten tournament and doing it pretty handily, I might add. Got them a 2 seed. I thought my Queens Royals were going to be a 16 seed, possibly in the play-in game. They get a 15 seed. I wanted you and I to have this opportunity to knock off Purdue because I thought they had the chops to do so. Now 15 seed Queens gets a shot at Purdue, and I do think, I won't do it on the show here necessarily because I'm sure you don't think so, and that's fine. But I think we could see a repeat of the 2023 game in which they completely imploded against Fairleigh Dickinson. That Fairleigh Dickinson team wasn't – I mean, they were okay. They had Terrence Brown. They had some guys. But this Queens team is much better than that FDU squad was. Granted, this Purdue team is a lot different as well. But they did have Fletcher Lawyer on that team. They did have Braden Smith on that team. They had, some they were younger, granted, and they made their run, in the last year of Zach Edey and kind of rectified that. But this Queens team can shoot. They have some guys who can score. This is just a real interesting spot to me. I wrestled with it for a while because, again, I don't want to pick some flashy upsets and kill my bracket early. I want to be sound with these decisions. I haven't picked to this point any wacky 16 over 1s, 15 over 2s. Hell, I've been picking the 5s or the 12s because I feel like they're just that much better. But this Queens team has the potential to really give Purdue a hard time. And I think that Purdue, even though they kind of got the quote-unquote monkey off their back the year with Zach Edey, they made their run. I could see them panicking early and almost like a Virginia situation. Remember I can't remember if it was the year after or the year 2 years after, right before COVID, but Virginia, after they lost the 16, they then fell within a year or two behind another 14 or 15 seed by like 10 plus points. And it was like, oh my God, here we go. You could see the panic in their face. They did claw back and ended up winning that game, but I don't know that Purdue would necessarily be able to do so. And especially for this fact that Purdue's been an upset victim a lot the last 5 to 6 years, pre-COVID even. We've seen them fall in the first or second round to a variety of teams. Queens is 25.5 point dogs. I love that plus 25.5 spread. I've already hit it for the Queen side. There's zero possibility to me that they lose by 20 plus points. They're covering the 25.5. I think they're live to win. I won't necessarily force you or the viewers there at home to pick this one with us, but I think they're live. They're the most live 15 seed to beat a 2 seed in the tournament this year. Probably won't see any 15s win, but if there is, it's going to be Queens. I don't know that I have to twist your arm so much because you're not really a Purdue fan either. But I know this one's probably a little too exotic for a this year's tournament. What do you think?
Probably just a little bit. I think Queens they don't defend enough. And you wrote a good article for FTN. If you subscribe, people should check it out. But kind of like player archetypes that succeed in the tournament. And Braden Smith is that type of point guard that can just carry teams in the tournament because of how he plays, how under control he is, how savvy he is. He can facilitate, he could score. And just with Queen's defense just being as porous as it is and Smith being that type of player archetype, I think even if it is a close game, Smith will just do some pick and rolls with Kaufman-Wren or Oscar Clough, and they'll be able to get the buckets they need to advance.
Yeah, and it's important to note Purdue is currently on Ken Palm, #1 in offensive efficiency overall, 36 in defensive efficiency. So Braden Smith's also only, what was it, 2 or 3 assists from the assist record.
1 assist,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, so he's obviously going to get that. Ken Palm has it as a 22-point game, so we have some value there at the plus 25.5. We'll run the models and see what it looks like. But yeah, this is one that I've in the FTN breakdown, or my bracket breakdown, I did pick this one. But in my main one that I submitted to contests, I'll probably go with Purdue. But I think Queens is live. We'll advance Purdue though for the sake of this. My man, Dr. Añejo. So Walt, GOAT, appreciate you tuning in, Añejo, showing us the support and love. During the summer, Adam, I ventured into the gambling spaces. So Twitter has these spaces where you can just, have a community of people talking sports, whatever. I wandered into them, and it was a scary place, but I met a lot of good people, and Dr. Neho is one that I did come across. So appreciate you supporting us there, man. All right, so that takes us up top here. Arizona, the 1 seed, taking on the 9 seed Utah State. Mountain West advancing 1 round, I think, will be good for their overall reputation, but a date with Arizona, not much of a prize. What do you foresee happening in this one?
Yeah, Arizona's too good. Top 5 in offensive and defensive efficiency. So I don't think we have any problems moving them along.
Yeah. That takes us to the banger of a second round matchup. Easily, I mean, I shouldn't even say easily. I mean, St. John's, Kansas is a potential second round matchup. That's great. But something about this Wisconsin-Arkansas game just has absolute banger written all over it. Probably because a lot of what we do, we come at from a fantasy standpoint. And that's just going to be like the most stackable game of the year. As our resident Wisconsin fan / expert, and you've done pretty good with your reads on Arkansas, and shit, you drafted a bunch of Arkansas guys in our player draft on Fandrax tonight. So you're well equipped to talk about them as well. But what do you think about this game? Absolute fantastic matchup. Can't wait. Hope we get to see it.
Yeah, this is the game I struggle with the most. And I even said it during the selection show when they released this quadrant that I hated the fact that they were probably going to face each other because, of course, as a Wisconsin guy, I want them to win. I think they have the ability to win. Wisconsin's a very 3-point reliant team, though. So they could obviously shoot themselves out of any game or shoot themselves ahead of any game as well. I think Wisconsin's not necessarily a good enough defensive team to just neutralize Acuff. And I do think athletically Arkansas has the advantage as well. So my heart wants Wisconsin, but my head leans Arkansas ever so slightly. But I would not be shocked by any result in this game. Wisconsin could even win by 15-20 if they, shoot 15-30 from 3 like they did in, I think it was a game against Michigan that they won earlier this year. So all possibilities are on the table, but I just gun to my head, it'd be Arkansas.
Yeah, and Blackwell and Boyd are I mean, they're just absolutely playing sick right now. The game against Michigan, they had some pretty rough first halves, and then they started piling it on quickly. And then even the matchup before that against Illinois that went overtime, they started slow, and then before you knew it, they both had damn near 40 points each. It's just crazy how fast they can fill it up. I like Arkansas to advance here too. It comes down to a cuff. I think Darius is going to have the type of tournament that, I mean, his stock is already sky high, but there's a chance for him to maybe be a fringe top 3 with like just a massive tournament. I think he puts on a show against Hawaii, as we said, like flirts with a triple double. And he's obviously going to have the ball in his hands 90% of the time against Wisconsin. We're talking 45% usage rate stuff here. I think he's just going to be too much for Wisconsin. But like you said, that result I think could go either way. But I will be picking Arkansas as well. All right, BYU versus Gonzaga rematch, or I shouldn't say rematch, but a battle of former WCC foes. Gonzaga going into the revised Pac-12, BYU now in the Big 12. This will be a game, I think. I tried to sell us on Ty and Grant Foster too early in the WCC tournament. He like 1 game later, they unleashed him. This is why they brought guys like that in. Ty and Grant Foster, Jalen Werley, like these guys who can do some real damage and have in their previous destinations. This is exactly the type of game that we could see a guy like Ty and Grant Foster just absolutely erupt, especially if BYU, with the bodies they have in the front court, tries to get physical with EK or Debansta attacking the lane. Perhaps they get EK into some foul trouble, or maybe the guards of Gonzaga are a little bit rattled at any point. Like, they can lean on Grant Foster, and I think this will be a game in which he does, not single-handedly by any means, but a major factor for why they do advance over BYU. So I do like Gonzaga to restart their Sweet 16 streak. Do you think Debansta can do enough here, or are you on board with Gonzaga as well?
Yeah, no objections for me. I also think just strategically, again, we're much more confident in Gonzaga advancing to the spot. We think BYU will get there, but just makes more sense to lean Gonzaga here and get their Sweet 16 streak going again.
So it takes us to a second-round matchup between Purdue and possibly Miami or Missouri. Where do you see this one ending up here? Do you see Purdue, with that Braden Smith-inspired play, they're not going to get rattled. They just absolutely dominated in the Big Ten tournament. 2023 is in the rearview mirror by a long shot. Do you think they take care of business here against the 7 and or 10 seed, or do they trip up?
I do. I think it doesn't really matter if it's Miami or Mizzou. I think anything could happen in that first round matchup, but I like Braden Smith to be able to carry the team here. I also think Oscar Clough's emergence in the last couple of games, it's almost given them, it was almost like you'd either get Kaufman, Wren, or Clough. Now you're kind of getting both of them. So I do think that just having that extra, a little bit of oomph there from the bigs is enough, but I'm certainly more confident in Purdue here. I think I want the ball in Braden Smith's hands, and if Miami advances, I wasn't even that confident in them getting past Missouri, but I'm certainly not that confident in Missouri as well as the team, so let's advance Purdue.
Like it. All right, yeah, you mentioned Clough. He was really good in the non-con, and then it felt like he became a non-con hero pretty quickly in the Big Ten, but he's picked it back up when he needs to, and that's another element to Purdue that has to be considered. All right, in the Sweet 16, we got the 1 seed Arizona taking on the 4 seed Arkansas. Another great game. I think Darius Cuff, putting up 30 or just 20 and 10 type of game against a team like Arizona, win or lose, is going to do so much for his stock. He's going to be one of the best players, all tournament team, regardless if they drop out here or not. But I gotta lean into Arizona. Well coached, Tommy Lloyd, the narrative ahead in the Elite Eight, possibly against Gonzaga, it's just too much for me to overlook. So I do have to move Arizona on here. Are you in agreement there, or what do you think? Arkansas can maybe stay alive one more round?
I agree. I think Acuff will put on a show, and they won't lose because of him. I think they'll just lose because Arizona is a superior team. And we've seen Acuff's had massive performances in games that have come down to the wire against more mediocre competition. So I think Acuff will have a great game, but Arizona will win maybe by 8-10.
Like it. Let's advance them. That takes us to the matchup between Gonzaga as the 3 seed and Purdue as the 2 seed. Now, I'm pretty down on Purdue. I do admit Braden Smith, he's a killer. He's been great, especially, they're hot at the right time. I have some questions about them. I think that they might struggle a bit. If they do get here against Gonzaga, that my Sweet 16 winner here, regardless of who Gonzaga faces, is going to lose to Gonzaga. I feel pretty confident about that, which sets up the Mark Few versus Tommy Lloyd, teacher versus student matchup. That is what is going to be talked about heavily. Again, Adam Miller transferred from ASU, Ty and Grant Foster from Grand Canyon, Jalen Worley from FSU, all these different pieces that the Zags brought in. This is what it's for, this run, a March Madness run. And they don't have to rely on just EK. There's a lot of talk about, Braden Huff won't be back until at least the Sweet 16, and now he might not be back at all. What are they going to do? That's why they have this tremendous depth. That's why they went to the portal and loaded up the way they did, because if they had an injury to a star like Braden Huff, they could still move forward with the group they have. And I think they will ultimately beat Purdue here if that's who they face. I don't think it matters who they face. I think they're going to, this matchup is destiny. But what do you think?
I like it. Yeah. No, I've been waiting for this one. That's probably one of the, we could be blessed with two amazing games in this squadron between Wisconsin and Arkansas, even Wisconsin or even Arizona, Arkansas. But Arizona Gonzaga would be, amazing for an Elite Eight game. It's one we want to see, and it's the one we're going to do for the sake of this bracket.
It's almost a trait. Like, you and I follow low and mid majors. We like the upsets. I mean, who doesn't? The casual fan loves upsets as well, but it's almost a trade-off. Like, you lose some upsets in the era that we live in currently, but you get these just gargantuan, like, amazing Final Four caliber matchups before the actual Final Four. So it's a bit of a trade-off there, because when you get these types of matchups, it's okay to maybe lose an upset here or there, but I don't want to have no upsets either. I want some kind of balance. All right, so we have Arizona taking on Gonzaga here. I wrote it up in my little narrative that I did for FTN, but not quite a passing of the torch, because Mark Few and Gonzaga are certainly not going anywhere. They're going into the revised Pac-12. They're going to be playing, all the people on Twitter, Gonzaga doesn't play anyone, even though they have a great strength of schedule, and they do in fact play a lot of high major teams. They're not going anywhere. But this Arizona team this year, they're finally going to get the quote unquote monkey off their back. Tommy Lloyd's had some great Arizona teams in his short time there, but he's developed a kind of maybe even an unfair reputation of just choking and falling out before these key rounds. Certainly before the Final Four. And I personally think they have enough. They've got the veterans on their team. They've got a veteran point guard in Jaden Bradley. And they've got the mix of freshman scorers like Braden Burries and Koa Pete. They've got the low court, front court banger in Toba Waka, who happily comes off the bench. Karchdinikov is coming into his own. Krivas has been kind of bad lately, for lack of a better term, but still, you can rely on him for the most part, especially on the glass. They just have all the pieces. I think their starting five is better than Gonzaga. They don't have the depth, but if that starting five can avoid foul trouble, injuries, poor shooting night, I think Arizona should probably advance here. What do you think about this matchup?
Yeah, there's just so many ways that Arizona can beat you, and we've seen it. They've only lost twice all year, actually back-to-back games. But Arizona, I didn't really touch on this yet, but it's going to be a reason why I have Arizona going pretty far in just about every bracket that I do. They have a closer in Jaden Bradley. We saw him do it against Iowa State in the semifinal of the Big 12 tournament. He's the type of experienced 4-year player that we don't see that often anymore. And those are teams, I want a player like that on my team that I'm picking to go to a national title potentially. And we've already seen it in a tournament setting. So having someone like Jaden Bradley with that experience and just the ways that they could beat you in so many different ways, I just can't see Gonzaga beating them here.
Yeah. It'll be a great game. It'll be a test, but yeah, this Arizona team it's something else this year. All right, that takes us into the Midwest, our final region here. Michigan had a little bit of a skid there to end the year. Not the number one overall 1 seed like it looked like they would probably be, especially as early as 2 weeks ago. Taking on Howard, who did defeat UMBC today, get rid of that, beat that conference that rigs games. Love Howard. They played extremely well, but no 16 over 01 here. Michigan is just far too good. Howard's a feel good story, and actually a really good team. Coming out of a HBCU. Really a pretty solid roster. But you're asking them to do way too much here against Michigan.
Yeah, no objections.
All right, so we'll advance them. Then another 8-9 game here. Georgia taking on St. Louis. I thought long and hard about this one when I wrote it up and really kind of, went back and forth. The reason why I lean St. Louis, inconsistent guard play of Georgia. They do a lot of boneheaded things. They turn the ball over at a really alarming rate at times. They do have a bucket getter in Jeremiah Wilkinson who could single-handedly carry them in a one and you're done format. But St. Louis just has a massive edge in 3-point shooting. They're second nationally in 3-point shooting efficiency per Ken Palm. They've got Kareem Abdul-Jabbar himself and Ravi Avila, kind of stretch five unicorn that we've seen do well in this tournament in the past. Cameron Krutwig from Loyola Chicago comes to mind. I just feel like St. Louis ends up winning, and there's going to be a lot of people, I think, down on St. Louis because they did limp to the end of the finish line here. But Georgia doesn't do anything to actually inspire confidence either. I could see it going either way. It's certainly not a game that I plan to bet, but I do think St. Louis 3-point shooting is what ultimately carries them here. What do you think about this one?
I also have to wonder if St. Louis just slept walk a little bit through the back half of the season, because there was a point in time where they only had one loss, and people are talking about that. I mean, they're great from 2-point range, great 2-point field goal defense as well. So they were kind of getting it done on both ends, and we're one of the better teams. People were talking about them making a deep run in March, and then it just kind of stopped. They just kind of became very inconsistent. But you have to wonder if they kind of felt like they had a at-large spot locked up in a worst-case scenario. So I'd look for them to kind of get back to what they were earlier in the season here, especially with Georgia being a team that's not very trustworthy.
Yeah, exactly. St. Louis plays 21st in tempo, so they're very comfortable there with that type of play. That's what Georgia thrives on. They're 16th in tempo. But the big difference is you touched on it. St. Louis overall, their defensive efficiency is 42nd, so they're not top 25 there. But when you dig further, they're second in effective field goal defense, second in offensive effective field goal percentage, and then their 3-point defense is top 10 in the country. Their 2-point defense is even better, top 5 in the country. So they had, like you mentioned, the limp to the finish line, which may very well have been kind of just a sleepy thing for them. I do think they can turn it back on here and do beat Georgia. I just have a lot more trust in Coach Schurz than I do Coach White. So we'll move St. Louis here. All right, now we haven't had any 12s over a 5 here, but the last one available to take would be Akron over Texas Tech. Now, this is a difficult one for me because prior to the season starting, I was all over Texas Tech, and I built a pretty healthy futures position on Texas Tech, got a great number multiple ways, and it looked pretty damn good, especially as we turned the corner to the 2026 calendar. But then JT Toppin suffered a season-ending injury, and that pretty much derailed all thoughts of Texas Tech making a run. Now, they still won some big games. Christian Anderson carried them. Donovan Atwell had some huge games. They have enough pieces to win a round or two, but I don't know if they actually will. I do think if a 12 over 5 happens, much more common in the past than it has been recently, maybe. But I think Akron is live here to not only cover but win the game. Christian Anderson pulled his groin on that awful Big 12 glass court. He's going to play, but the groin injury, if anyone has suffered that type of injury, it is one that is nagging and does not go away very quickly. I think that there's a real problem here for Texas Tech, and I hate to see that they fizzle out early because of injuries, but I do think that's the fate that waits for them here. 2-bid MAC league, by the way. Love it. Akron in the field. They have some great players. They're comfortable playing at a fast pace. They can get after it on offense. They can defend. This is a real classic 12 over 5 spot that I think we almost have to pick, at least here on the show. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to let you do it. I don't know if I'll do it in my bracket. I do think Texas Tech has proven that they can win games even without JT Toppin. You mentioned that already. And I think Akron, they've been in the tournament. I think this is their 3rd straight year. And when they've played high major competition, they've struggled. And the same arguments that people have for Miami, Ohio not being deserving of being in the field is the same argument you can make that Akron didn't play anybody, really. Akron didn't even beat Miami, Ohio. So
right.
It's going to be tough for them to beat Texas Tech, even a little bit of a wounded animal Texas Tech team. But for the sake of the show, because it's the most likely 12 over 5, and you always kind of want to have one of them, I'm okay with it because it would be the 112 seed that I would have the most confidence in.
Yeah, and it's strictly for me an injury thing. I do think they have the horses, to pull this off. and stylistically, I think they would be comfortable. You've seen Texas Tech in some high scoring games. I think, if this one ended up like a 90, 89 type of game, Akron, they wouldn't go away like some other mid majors would. So yeah, I'd like to advance them. Now we have the 4 seed taking on the 13 seed, Alabama versus Hofstra. The news came out recently. Aiden Holloway, felony charges for having a shit ton of weed. It's legal to have some weed in some states and not in others. He had just over 1.5 pounds apparently at his house. Say what you will about it. It's weed. I don't know, but why put yourself in that position right before the tournament? Fairly dumb decision. How do you feel about this? Because you're very familiar with Hofstra. Big Monmouth fan. Hofstra ekes it out there in the CAA. Could have gone the other way, though, very easily. I think Bama probably still has enough talent here, even without Holloway. But, man, this is a real big, big loss for Alabama. I think that people are making that recognition, but not quite to the level I think they should. So what do you think about this matchup here with Hofstra?
I still like Alabama, but I do think it's they certainly don't have that as high a floor as they had if Holloway was there, just because of his scoring and his outside shooting. Hofstra's got a really good backcourt, Cruz Davis and freshman Preston Amid. I just don't know if they have the size and the athleticism. I think Alabama will still be able to kind of handle them. Hofstra was the best team probably in the CAA by the advanced metrics, even though UNC Wilmington was the top seed. But I do think Alabama still has enough even without Holloway. I know I stacked them a little bit in our Fan Tracks League tonight, thinking that they'll probably play at least 2 games. And it's certainly possible, the way we have this bracket set up too. If they get past Hofstra, I do like them against Akron as well. So I'm probably going to ride that train here.
Yeah, this is one that I had written it up as, had Cal Baptist drew this matchup instead of Hofstra, that I would be really banging the drum and lobbying for people to open their eyes for a Baptist over Bama upset because of the offensive weaponry that Cal Baptist has. We know with Alabama, the way they play, they're just susceptible to cold nights. If they're not making their threes, it's a long night. If they are, the other team is going to have a long night themselves. Hofstra does have a top 10 effective field goal efficiency from the defensive standpoint. They're also very, very good defending on 2-point. Not so good, mediocre, I guess I should say, or average at 3-point defense, but their interior defense has been extremely stout. Now, they also don't play teams like Alabama in their everyday conference. So size-wise, had they done so, they would probably have some trouble. They do have the 7-footer Silas Sunday, but it's not exactly a conditioned, player that can handle 35-plus minutes in a track meet. One area of Hofstra's game that they are very good at as well, they're top 30 in 3-point percentage offensively. So they do shoot the 3 well. Cruz Davis, about a 41% shooter. Preston Edmond, the freshman you mentioned, who I think is going to be really good if he doesn't get plucked away by the portal, probably will. Shooting about 39% from long range, 38% for German Plotnikov. So they have the shooters, and by way of Bama playing this frenetic pace, shooting threes with reckless abandon, they can put themselves in a position to go down if Hofstra's making shots. I don't think it will happen. I don't. When this matchup was called out, I wasn't really that happy with it. I felt like, any other team at the mid-major level, like a Baptist, would have been better for us for a possible, not only DFS purposes, but a possible upset as well. So yeah, I'll defer to you. I didn't pick it, Hofstra over Bama in my bracket, and I won't here. I think Bama probably advances. All right, Tennessee as the 6th seed, taking on the winner of tomorrow's playing game, Miami of Ohio versus SMU. Now, SMU opened up as 6.5-point favorites against Miami, Ohio. Then it got to 9.5. Now it's back to like 7. I slammed Miami at 9. SMU's defense is horrible. To me, it's irrelevant who gets through. I would like to see Miami beat SMU, because if they don't, man, those kids and that staff and their fans are going to get a rash of shit on Twitter from everyone, and I don't want that for them. But I think the Vols maybe I shouldn't use the word easily, but I think comfortably advance regardless of who wins that playing game. I think the Vols might be one of the best 6 seeds we've seen in like 3 years. I find myself every March, every tournament, every bracket, falling in love with the Vols, even though Rick Barnes and his crew always break my heart. I say that I won't fall for this again the next year. Fast forward to March, and here I am again thinking that the Vols not only win this game, I think they have a chance to maybe win a few. So I'm comfortably picking them against whoever the play-in game winner is here. Especially recently, we've had the Vols on our main slates a lot, so we've gotten pretty comfortable with them as well. What do you foresee for them in this matchup against Miami of Ohio or SMU?
Yeah, I'm okay with moving Tennessee ahead because if SMU wins, I'm extremely confident that Tennessee wins that game. I'd actually have a little bit more confidence in Miami, Ohio, just because they could score the ball, whereas Tennessee struggles at times putting the ball in the basket. But just because strategically there's a chance that they could get an even more favorable matchup against SMU, let's just move Tennessee.
All right. That takes us to the 3 seed versus 14 seed, Virginia versus Wright State. I have to admit, I undervalued Virginia. Didn't take them too seriously until it was too late. Impressive end of the season for them. The Horizon champion Wright State, they have defensive chops. They've got some guards, but this just seems like a pretty brutal matchup for them. I've seen a few people bang the drum for Wright State, but I don't see it. I don't see this one being a particularly close either. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not confident enough in Wright State. I know we saw Oakland take down Kentucky a couple of years ago with Jack Golke, but I don't think this is going to be a repeat of that. Virginia, like you said, I underestimated them as well. I mean, they're actually Brian Odom. It's a great story with him coaching Virginia after helping lead the upset over them with UMBC. But Virginia, they just don't really beat themselves, and so I don't see any way Wright State's going to take them down.
No, it's not on the table. All right, that takes us down here to one of the best. We agreed, both one of the best first round games of the tournament. 7 seed Kentucky against the 10 seed Santa Clara. 3-bid WCC. I got to say it again because I just love it. I'm all over Santa Clara here. I believe you are too. You know, Alan Graves, future pro, G League, just, comes off the bench inexplicably. Amazing fantasy producer for us. Just unbelievable player. They also have Christian Hammond, solid guard, Elijah Mahi. They have the pieces here to compete. And defensively, they can really, I think, hold their own against guys like Denzel Aberdeen and Otega Howie, who have a tendency to beat themselves, honestly. And Colin Chandler as well. If you just play good, straight-up defense and don't foul, they will most likely beat themselves with, untimely turnovers. We've seen it from Kentucky time and time again. Feel good story here. Herb Sendek as the coach. It was kind of a lot of battles for him, got written off and kind of just forgotten about for a while. But here he is leading Santa Clara to their first tournament since 1996. And I think they'll stick around, honestly. I've been rostering Otega Awe a lot. He's just a guy that does everything. But, man, this Kentucky team, they beat themselves so much. I think Santa Clara doesn't beat themselves very often, as we saw in the last month and a half of the season. And I think that they end up winning. It will be a close game, certainly, but I think Santa Clara, it's one of those ones from start to finish where they're never really in doubt. What do you think?
Yeah, with the way Santa Clara shoots the ball too, and what we've seen from Kentucky this year is they struggle in first halves. They dig themselves into holes quite often. I don't think Santa Clara is a team you want to dig yourself a hole against because they can really score the ball. If you're down 10, 15 points at halftime against Santa Clara, I don't really know if you're coming back. We saw Gonzaga come back against Santa Clara a bit in that first matchup, but I don't think Santa Clara is going to let a big lead like that go. And I think they have the ability to shoot the ball well enough and score the ball well enough to make Kentucky pay for a slow first half.
Yeah, I totally agree. That takes us to the final. So we'll move Santa Clara. Final first round matchup of the bracket. Iowa State is a 2 seed taking on the OVC champion Tennessee State. Heard some chatter about Tennessee State covering. I don't feel particularly great about Iowa State, but I do think they beat the 15 seed here. So preemptively move them forward here. Let's jump up to the second round matchup between Michigan and St. Louis. Some skilled players on both sides, but I think Michigan is just a team on a mission. Their half of this region sets up really well for them to kind of cruise into the Elite Eight, in my opinion. Do you have any problems with them against St. Louis moving on before we do?
No, not at all. Plus, if we don't move them on, we're just blowing up the bracket. We're probably going to have Alabama have to go to the Final Four if we take Michigan out of the picture. So, no, Michigan.
Yeah, no. Akron. All right, so potential matchup here between the 12 and 4, Akron versus Alabama, or if it's Texas Tech versus Alabama. Real worried about this Holloway situation, but Philon is amazing. They have Amari Allen, who's the freshman, who's had a rough go of it the last month of the season. He could wake back up. They've got Latrell Wrightsell, who, can seemingly get hot at any moment. Probably enough still to get themselves to the Sweet 16, even if they have to face Texas Tech. Because, again, if Texas Tech does beat Akron, and they might, I just feel like the, lack of presence from JT Toppin, no depth, and Christian Anderson dealing with the groin issue, it's just going to be too much for them to overcome. Alabama is extremely fortunate that this is their draw. Had they been over in the East, they probably would be going home extremely early without Holloway. What do you think about them advancing here?
Yeah, I think you said it. I think just the draw itself has been favorable for them. They should be able to take care of a Hofstra team that's kind of like a mid-major version of themselves to some extent, and then either an injured Texas Tech team or a mid-major Akron coming off a big win. So even without Holloway, yes, I have Alabama against Michigan.
All right, what are you doing here? We're almost done. Tennessee versus Virginia, the 6 versus 3. What's your take on this one?
This one, I actually lean Virginia, probably for 2 reasons. I don't trust Tennessee to score the ball enough. I think Virginia is good on both sides of the ball. I also have more confidence in Virginia getting to this spot. I do think Miami, Ohio is a bit live for an upset over Tennessee if they do win tomorrow. But since we don't know that, we safely advance Tennessee. But against Virginia, I just have more confidence in them getting to the spot. I think they're just a more sound team overall. And we've mentioned the struggles that Tennessee has had in March. So I'm comfortable with Virginia there.
Yeah, let's move Virginia on. I'll have some brackets with Tennessee. I'm ready for that heartbreak again. But yeah, let's move Virginia on here. And then we have the 10 versus 2, Iowa State taking on Santa Clara. I don't have a lot of confidence in Iowa State. We've had a pretty chalky bracket, which I think is probably going to come to fruition. But these Cyclones have shown vulnerabilities. And I think they could easily get caught off guard by a very well-devised game plan from Herb Sendek. Herb Sendek, again, I want to harp on, he's a really good coach. He was written off after, some disaster high major stops and kind of just tucked away here at Santa Clara and forgotten about. And he's built this program up brick by brick, step by step. And now he has this amazing future pro talent in Alan Graves. I think they're live to beat Iowa State. I think they have the shooting, they have the defense. Iowa State goes long stretches without scoring. Jefferson gets into foul trouble unnecessarily. I know they have Mom Klevovich who can shoot out, with anyone, but I think the Broncos are live here. What do you think?
I'm thinking we don't have enough, madness in this bracket, and I'll probably be messing around with some of my brackets, some picks like this, since we don't have it. And I do have a little bit more confidence in Virginia the more I've thought about this. And like you said, I'm not as high on Iowa State as others. So let's do Santa Clara here just for a little bit of a contrarian angle here. I do think they, it's contrasting styles. Again, Iowa State's defense is really good. Santa Clara can score the ball. But let's go with the variance here and say that Santa Clara shoots the lights out and pulls off the upset.
I like it. I honestly think they can do it. So let's move them on here. Takes us to the Sweet 16, Michigan versus Alabama. This is where the lack of, your second scorer really hurts you against Michigan. Michigan will key in on Philon. You have some other pieces on Bama. I mean, they are a relatively deep team compared to some of the others. But without him, I don't see a clear way for them to win. If Michigan is hitting their shots, we've seen it in games. Their front court's going to do what they do. Their guards, that's a little more hit or miss. But if Trey McKinney's hitting shots, Navari Burnett, goes for 15 first half points, Bama's just going to be buried. I have no faith in them. And even if Holloway was playing, there's some talk about, well, maybe he'll be back. I doubt it. I think it's irrelevant. I have Michigan advancing here pretty comfortably. What do you think?
Yeah, at some point, Alabama has to be hurt by this whole Holloway situation. They lucked out with their draw till they get to this spot, but then once they run into Michigan, that's just too much to overcome.
Yeah. Takes us to the 3-seed Virginia versus the 10-seed Santa Clara. You said you're pretty confident in Virginia. They're just extremely well coached. They're another one of those teams. This will be interesting, though, because I feel like Santa Clara, I had mentioned against Kentucky, that Santa Clara won't beat themselves, but Kentucky will. Kentucky, you just have to be patient. They are going to make a mistake, and you just have to wait for it. Virginia doesn't make those mistakes. They forced Miami into those mistakes. And we saw Santa Clara. They gave a hell of a first-half effort against Gonzaga. Second half, Gonzaga just decided they were done playing around and shut them out. I feel like Virginia may have something similar happen where Santa Clara, might have a halftime lead, but then they make those adjustments and suddenly Santa Clara finds it difficult to score the basketball. And if that's the case, I do think Virginia has a pretty solid chance to advance to this point. I hadn't really thought about them as a potential Elite Eight matchup for Michigan, but the more I look at it and we talk it out, it does make a lot of sense to me. So why don't we advance them here? And then you tell me who you like between Michigan and Virginia for the Final Four spot.
Yeah, at some point, I think Virginia's they're not a bad offense. They can shoot the three pretty well, but I just don't think they have enough offensive firepower here. Plus, they do have a big strength down low in Onyenso, but Michigan has a 7'3" Daimara there to kind of neutralize him a little bit, and not necessarily foreseeing Mara getting 8 shots blocked by Onyenso like he did against Duke in the ACC final. So Michigan's just the better team here. It's not worth picking against them in this spot.
No, I think they're into the Final Four as well. Onyenso has been great and will probably have some big moments in the tournament, but front court of Michigan is going to have him in a blender, and he's probably going to be in foul trouble. I feel pretty confident saying that. So that takes us to our Final Four. We have Duke versus Houston, Arizona versus Michigan. Lead us off, Duke versus Houston. A lot on the line here. Both teams had to go through hell, especially Duke, to get to this point. Do you see them getting into the title game against Houston, or do they have enough to get back to the national championship game for a second year in a row?
Well, I'm actually very skeptical about Duke, probably more skeptical than most people, but I do have my concerns with Houston as well. There's just something a little bit off with them this year. They just didn't have, it was a little bit of a toughness aspect. Maybe it's just the fact that they're missing a little bit of the three-point shooting from like an LJ Cryer last year. But I do think Houston there's just a little something missing. I can't quite place it. And I think we've talked about revenge narratives in this bracket as well. And other times Duke, rematch in the regional final from last year. I do think that Duke has enough here. I think Boozer just has that winning pedigree. And if Houston didn't have that little thing missing that I can't quite explain, I'd probably pick Houston here, but I'm going to advance Duke.
I'm on Duke as well. I'm a grew up, and then if you're a 90s kid like I was, didn't matter where you lived in the country, you were a fan of Duke or you were a fan of North Carolina. It's just the way it was in the 90s. And I was very heavily a fan of the Tar Heels, baby blue. So I'm a proclaimed Duke hater a lot of times, but I found myself having difficulties hating Duke last year with Cooper Flagg. The team was just a likable team. It's the first likable Duke team in my entire memory. This year, especially early on, Johnny, who's in our Discord, we have some futures together, and he's a big Duke fan, but he didn't bring them up. And I said, this Duke team, we might want to build a position on them. And he on the phone, he was like, "What are you talking about? You hate Duke?" And I was like, "I think this Duke team might be a championship caliber club." And I've seen nothing to tell us otherwise. Very tough matchup against Houston. I'll tell you what Houston is missing. And we have talked about it kind of privately in the past in our community. A Jawan Roberts type, right? On that, kind of like that tough guy that can get a bucket, grab a key rebound. He'll make a hustle play. They just don't have that. Juwan Roberts was that guy for them, and you can go back and Bryson Gresham and Fabian White, guys like that. You can go back and say that's that like tough kind of glue guy. And I just don't feel like they have it. Like Senak is too. He's not that glue guy. He's more of a scorer. He's got to have the ball. He's young. JoJo Tugler. I mean, God, if he keeps playing like that, who knows? But I don't know if he can. In their guard play, we know Sharp can disappear. Uzan's not really an offensive weapon, and I just think it's that Juwan Roberts, Fabian White type that they're missing ultimately. All right, that takes us over here to the Arizona versus Michigan game. Extremely hard one to pick. It wouldn't shock me one way or another. Could be Arizona, and I would totally buy in. Could be Michigan, and I'd totally buy in. I think more will pick Arizona for whatever reason, just because they've looked better, and Michigan's kind of faltered here recently. Where's your head at for this one? 3 number 1 seeds in the Final Four, very likely. But the only one where it pits 2 of them together, Arizona and Michigan. Who do you like to come out of this one?
I slightly prefer Arizona. I think the one matchup, I just trust Jaden Bradley over Elliot Cadeau. If it comes down to those 2 guards here, I like Arizona's size. They're a very good rebounding team. So I think Michigan's biggest strengths with their bigs is somewhat neutralized by Arizona being such a good rebounding team, very good defensive team. Krivas is a very good defender, shot blocker. But it just comes down to the guards. I just don't trust Elliot Cadeau to make big shots. He's sometimes careless with the ball, whereas Jaden Bradley's that closer that I talked about. I just trust him with the ball in his hands in big spots with the experience. And so that's the difference. Although, like you said, could go either way. I do lean Arizona just ever so slightly. Bradley's the main X factor.
Yeah, I personally think more complete game is going to be had by Michigan, but last possession, tie game, you need a bucket. Something's got to happen. You got to make a play. Yes, Jaden Bradley. I'm more, my life is on the line. I got to put the ball in this player's hand, Jaden Bradley or Elliot Cadeau. I'm probably taking Jaden Bradley there 90 to 95% of the time. Cadeau's a great facilitator. The Michigan shooting is going to be the story all tournament long, when especially when they get into these rounds, if it's going to be there. So I'm okay taking Arizona. In my initial bracket, I did pick Michigan versus Duke, but I am perfectly content with an Arizona versus Duke title game here, which is going to be an absolute war. The rematch of Michigan Duke would be a storyline, but Arizona versus Duke. 2 coaches who, are relatively fresh in their head coaching careers, but already taking on a tremendous pressure, already being called, choke artists because the expectations are so high at both programs. With that being said, who do you have coming out on top here and cutting down the nets ultimately on Monday, April 6th?
I've been pretty steadfast with Arizona. Mid-season, I was very high on them. They had the 2-game losing streak. I wasn't quite deterred. They ran through the Big 12 tournament. They handled Houston twice, once on the road. I just think Arizona just has so many ways that they could beat you. I know I said that before, and I know I've been harping on this closer in Jaden Bradley, but they do have a lot of freshmen. But then again, so does Duke. I mean, their best player obviously is a freshman. Their point guard is probably going to be a freshman with Foster out. We still don't know about the injuries with Duke. They'll probably be fine. But I just think Arizona just from top to bottom is a little bit more stronger. They have a little bit higher floor. And the guard play is going to be a difference. If Duke's had any weakness this year, it's been guard play. And I know we talk about guard play being big in March. And both of these teams are top 5 in offensive and defensive efficiency. So these are probably the 2 best teams in the country. But I've leaned Arizona in just about every bracket I've filled out, so I'm not going to change that here.
Yeah, I like it. And, you got to be an older guy like me to go back to 1997 when Arizona won the title there. They were like 25-9, 25-10. Like they weren't the best team going in, and they were a 4 seed, I'm pretty sure. But they had Mike Bibby, Miles Simon, who was incredible. Never heard from him again, but he was awesome. Jason Terry, Michael Dickerson, like the weapons that they had on that team in that starting five were on par with what we're seeing now. And the difference with this Arizona team is they actually have a capable front court that can body up with Duke, they can body up with Michigan. The Arizona team in '97 didn't necessarily have that, but they had incredible guards and wings, which is what you need ultimately to win the tournament. You sold me on the closer, that is Jaden Bradley. I don't think Duke has that. In fact, I know they don't. Even if Caleb Foster was playing, Foster's not Jaden Bradley, and I don't think I'd call him a closer either. So I'm okay declaring Arizona as the Supershow national champions, Arizona Wildcats, back to the promised land. Tommy Lloyd suddenly becomes one of the top 5 coaches in the world, possibly top 3. Arizona, great choice. It's going to be one of Arizona, Duke, Michigan, possibly Houston. We know from the Ken Palm talk, it's got to be a team in the top 20 in offensive and defensive efficiency. All 3 to 4 of those teams qualify. Fringe teams like Illinois are there as well. But I do like the choice of Arizona with Jaden Bradley as the closer and the tournament MOP. Adam, it's extremely late. I know that I kept you. I apologize for that. Long-winded when we talk about this stuff. I do appreciate you as always. Feel pretty good about where we stand with this bracket. We're heading into the second day of the first 4 and NIT tomorrow. Plenty of content there. Tomorrow night, I'll have Mike Kutry on the show a little earlier in the night. We will be breaking down the day 1 slate Thursday, all 14 plus games. Don't want to miss that. Please make sure you continue to support the show. Likes, comments, questions, concerns, retweets, reposts, and the like. Thank you guys so much. Adam, appreciate you as always. Any final words before we head out of here?
Nope, just go Arizona. I'm going to be heavily invested in them. And I guess I have a hedge too. If Arizona does go down early, it's potentially to Wisconsin. So I guess I have that going for me. But no, I love being on the show. I'm glad we got to do this. I know it's late, but this time of year, I don't mind staying up late because we have reason to. And there's a lot of good basketball we have starting tomorrow, and then of course Thursday. So I'll be watching tomorrow's show with Kutry. So looking forward to that as well. And it's going to be a great week.
Absolutely. Let's get after it. The madness begins. Thanks, guys. Take care, and we'll see you next time.